Apocalypse. I can steal superpowers. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 426, Sky Spear. Come down and punish the remaining wishes of Zingan and the soul of the dead in the darkness of the snow. Crossing Yan's long hair swirled. The girl closed her eyes lightly, and the lines on her forehead glowed. The purple-blue source power overflowed from her body and rushed into the sky. At the top of the sky, dirty clouds were constantly spinning. The speed was very slow, but there was an unstoppable force. Heaven's Blade killing. Crossing Yan softly called out the name of the new Heaven's Blade, and then she suddenly opened her eyes. The dazzling star color filled her pupils, and the white of her eyes and the pupils were integrated, showing the color of the galaxy. So, the star-like girl began to rise into the sky. The wind and snow swirled around her, and a majesty that shook the world was bursting out unstoppably. High in the sky, among the stars, Crossing Yan, wrapped in the purple-blue star power, rose higher and higher like a meteor. The thick clouds were instantly broken, and the scattered clouds revealed a huge ring, and the stars in the sky revealed a corner. Tonight should be a beautiful starry night without clouds. At this time, Gluo was falling from a high altitude. When he was close to the ground, Gluo urged the power, and the pattern representing killing on the back of his right hand lit up. Gravity was instantly reversed, and Gluo and Mu Yingluo, whom he kidnapped, slowly fell to the ground. Blade of the sky. Gluo looked up and looked at the direction of Crossing Yan in the sky. Although he couldn't see anything because of the distance, Gluo could clearly feel that she was there. The contract that had been made, like an invisible line, trapped the two of them tightly. Even though Gluo couldn't see her, Crossing Yan was as bright as the sun in her perception. Heaven's Blade. At this moment, Crossing Yan, who was on the zenith, also sighed in the same way. The star-colored source power flowed out of her body, eventually forming a huge cocoon. In silence, the star-colored cocoon exploded like a star, and the overflowing source power fluttered like the wings of a butterfly, blowing the speckled glimmering debris into all directions. The light dissipated, and Crossing Yan, who was in the manifested state, had already turned into a soul state that ordinary people could not see, and her body had already turned into the true form of Heaven's Blade killing. Fall. Sky Spear. Crossing Yan, in the soul state, held the long spear full of flowing light in her hand, slightly accumulated power, and with her voice, she turned into a falling star. At that moment, half of the sky was illuminated, and in everyone's sight, a purple-blue color that could not be looked at directly fell from the zenith like a falling sun. The tower made of ice was surrounded by snow and wind, standing still like a mountain, but the falling sky spear pierced straight down, piercing the entire ice tower directly and finally piercing the earth. Boom 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 boom. The sound of the world collapsing sounded on the surface, and the towering ice tower instantly shattered into ice debris all over the sky, and then turned into nothingness under the damage of the star source power. This is, really. Gluo didn't want to admit that he was really scared, but he really didn't expect that just a blow that made Heaven's Blade killing appear would be so terrible. At this moment, with the landing point of killing as the center, a huge pit with a diameter of 1 kilometer appeared. The ring-shaped pit seemed to be pressed by a sphere, very standard and round, and the soil seemed to be pressed into tiles. In the middle of the pit, the star-colored spear stood vertically, as quiet as an ancient poem. Gluo, go, and take up your destiny. Crossing Yan, in the state of soul, floated beside Gluo like a dancing butterfly. She was shimmering with a dim light. Ordinary people could not see her existence, but Gluo was already familiar with her. Crossing Yan, will you stay with me forever? Gluo put down Mu Yingluo in his hand and released her source power, but Mu Yingluo had fainted, and it was a question whether she could wake up. Under the witness of the starry sky, I will live and die with him. Contract life and soul, share strength and power, and covenant the past and hometown until the end. Crossing Yan did not directly answer Gluo's question, but repeated the contract they had made. My contractor, even if the stars fall and the world ends, I will be by your side and witness it with you. Crossing Yan smiled slightly and floated to GLUO's left hand. She made a gesture of invitation, as if inviting GLUO to dance. My contractor, go ahead and take charge of your new destiny. As you wish. GLUO looked at the brilliant spear and began to move forward step by step. Crossing Yan, as she said, followed GLUO all the time, with expectant eyes. As they got closer, GLUO finally saw clearly the weapon aimed. Heaven's Blade killing. It was a very heavy and deep spear, with an overall length of about 3.5 meters, a 2-meter spear body and a 1.5-meter spear blade. The entire body of killing was made of purple translucent crystal, but the edge of the spear blade was a blue gem color. The counterweight blade at the end of the spear body was also 30 centimeters long, and the edge of the blade was also a gem blue. Without picking it up, even just looking at it, one could feel the depth and heaviness of this spear, and even doubted whether it was a weapon that humans could pick up, and whether it was really a spear. GLUO, Heaven's Blade Slayer, is a sky spear. To the people in your world, it seems a little beyond common sense. It is long and heavy, and does not look like a combat weapon. As the creator of Slayer, Crossing Yan had a proud expression on her face. She forged the fragments of Heaven's Blade Zu and Yuan sword into a weapon in their world. Is this considered NTR? However, in my world, the Sky Spear is like this. It is a heavy weapon that can only be used by realm warriors. It is an absolutely invincible weapon for breaking formations. If a human is touched by it, the least they will have is broken arms and legs. After all, it is too heavy. It is so heavy that it can be invincible just by waving it. Of course, its real use is to fight against wild beasts. Facing wild beasts that are dozens or hundreds of meters long, ordinary weapons can't even cut their skin, let alone their shells. It is precisely to fight against dangers that humans are beyond their reach that humans created the Sky Spear. Its blade is long enough and its body is heavy enough. With the blessing of source power, it is incredibly powerful. As for me, I once saw a very powerful woman. Her weapon was a Sky Spear. It was really a figure that will never be forgotten. Crossing Yan's popular science was a bit nagging, like an old man reminiscing about the past, but GLUO listened very seriously, and there was no impatience on his face. After the battle in Seoul State with the second apostle of Huanga and Shenming, Ji Siwen, GLUO and Crossing Yan, who had been cooperating with each other, truly became companions. Chapter 427. Killing. There may have been some disagreements between the two of them, or even hatred. But now, facing their common enemy, the world-devouring god, they are their only comrades after all. It's not that they have completely let go of their hatred, but that they have slowly learned to accept and trust each other. Crossing Yan, the name of the Sky Spear is a bit cool. GLUO had already walked into the pit at this time. The originally soft soil had turned into a solid ground like tiles. The pit with a diameter of 1000 meters was extremely shocking. The source power has never dissipated, but there are not many realm warriors. Becoming a realm warrior is like a fish leaping over the dragon gate and leaping to a higher class. The lowest is a knight class. That's really enviable. GLUO had already walked in front of killing at this time. The Sky Spear, which was like a crystal gem, had restrained its brilliance, but it still had an extraordinary beauty. The length of the spear was 3 meters and 5 meters long, nearly twice that of GLUO, who was 1 meter 78. The spear shaft was as thick as a baby's forearm, with relief-like patterns on it, which looked like the scene when the stars were created. GLUO, fate is like the vast stars, hanging in the sky. Although it is within your sight, it is forever out of reach. Crossing Yan drifted away slightly at this time. Her voice was deep and gentle, as if reminding, and also like a blessing. That's good. GLUO nodded gently, slowly stretched out his right hand, and grasped Crossing Z's gun. So, Crossing Yan's power was born here. The purple-blue source power surged from the sky gun, flowing into his body along GLUO's right arm. In GLUO's forearm, the star-like brilliant purple-blue light lit up, and the gloomy light gradually spread and eroded, from bones, to flesh and blood, and then to skin. GLUO felt that his right arm was a little cool, but from the outside, his right hand and forearm had undergone indescribable changes. From the right elbow forward, GLUO's bones, flesh, and blood, and skin gradually turned into a state similar to crystals, and the brilliant purple-blue color of stars flowed in between, just like the dazzling sea of stars in the distant Milky Way. Just like the body of a star god. Zingayan, it's like this again. GLUO didn't feel too surprised by the change in his right arm. The last time he borrowed Zingayan's power, he thought it was only temporary. Now it seems that it will be forever. Well, the blade of heaven resides in your right arm. When you hold, killing, and activate my power, it will become like this. How about this state? Killing? Zingayan showed an expression that said, you know what I mean. GLUO rolled his eyes at her, took a deep breath, and was still adapting to his power. Compared with the previous time, this time, Zingayan's power was unreserved. GLUO felt like he was in the stormy waves, and his soul was trembling. Until now, GLUO still didn't know what kind of existence Zingayan was, and what species she was. But it didn't matter. The half of Zingayan's blood in GLUO's heart had completely awakened at this time. The majestic star power surged in GLUO's body, as if they were cheering and roaring. Every muscle, every bone, and every tendon of GLUO could feel how powerful he was. The flowing star power was like smoke and mist, like brilliance and dust, with brilliant purple and deep and bright light. The dreamlike power was visibly surging in GLUO's right arm, and even GLUO's flesh and blood were filled with misty power. That was not the scene of a normal evolver being filled with power, because at this time, the rich power almost turned into liquid, flowing in GLUO's internal organs, bones, blood, muscles, tendons, skin, and hair. At this moment, GLUO's pupils had turned into vertical pupils like a giant dragon, with purple blue light flowing in his pupils. The blood that transcended the mortal world carried an amazing power that humans could not resist. Perhaps this was the dragon power in Western mythology. At this moment, GLUO truly felt that he could smash a small mountain with one punch. He didn't even need to use too much force, just use the source power, and with this punch, everything around him would be gone. Crossing Yan, I feel like I've never felt so good before. GLUO breathed a sigh of relief, and then began to use his right arm to pull Heaven's Blade Killing out of the soil inch by inch. At this moment, GLUO didn't know how strong he was now, but the idea in his mind was very simple. This sky spear is really damn heavy. GLUO felt a little incredible. Just a 3.5 meter long spear. How could it be so heavy? Is it the Ruai Jingu Bang? The weight is too outrageous. GLUO could clearly feel that after the killing transformation, all the attributes of his body doubled directly, completely, thoroughly, and without discounts. It is said that picking up a weapon is easy, even if it is lifting a large bulldozer with one hand. However, when GLUO picked up Heaven's Blade Killing, he felt his hands trembling a little. He felt that he could not lift it with one hand, and he needed both hands, and then used all his strength to barely do it. Zingayan, this is too outrageous. GLUO gritted his teeth, and felt that he had never been so tired before, but he still gritted his teeth and persisted. It took 2 or 3 minutes to pull out Heaven's Blade Killing. Congratulations. Zingayan seemed very satisfied with GLUO's performance. In the soul state, she circled around GLUO, and the emotion in her eyes could not hide some appreciation. Zingayan, how? GLUO was holding the heavy sky spear in his hand. Before he walked forward, his feet began to sink deeply. GLUO, it's time. Crossing Yan suddenly floated in front of GLUO, and in the state of soul, she stretched out her palm and silently overlapped with GLUO's right hand. Then, something incredible happened. Under Crossing Yan's control, the star-colored source power began to take effect, and GLUO's body began to float upwards, and was magically stuck in the air. Gravity control? GLUO knew that the newly born Heaven's Blade Killing had the ability to control gravity, but when he used it, he usually injected source power into his right arm, allowing the Heaven's Blade to passively play and stay in the body for a while. But at this time, Crossing Yan relied on the source power to actively use this power so that GLUO's body would not fall into the ground. GLUO, do you want to learn? In the teasing words, Crossing Yan showed a teasing smile, and at this moment, the girl's eyes were so beautiful that it was beyond words. It was like a magnificent starry sky, reflected on the calm sea. They reflect each other the broadest purest colors and beauty. Even the most beautiful gems in the world cannot compare with its clarity and flawlessness. The deep and distant purple blue color is so pure without a trace of impurities, revealing a breathtaking beauty. Chapter 428, No Return. If you want to learn, then choose me. Although Crossing Yan was in a soul state at this time, in GLUO's eyes, she was clearer than ever. The girl had a smile in her eyes, and her expression showed seriousness, determination, and hope. A hint of imperceptible uneasiness also appeared. GLUO, give up the return date, choose me. Crossing Yan, if you give up the return date, what do I have left? The real you is left. Crossing Yan's voice was very deep, like a warning from the other side of the sea. GLUO slowly clenched his teeth, holding Crossing K Sky Spear with both hands, and finally nodded. Then, give up. GLUO actually didn't know how he should face his past. He was two completely different people before the age of 14 and he who lost his memory at the age of 14. Although he knew fragments of the past, he had no nostalgia or yearning for the past. Instead, he had a desire to escape. However, at this moment, he has no way to escape. He must face his past, give up the inheritance in his hands, and welcome a new life. The stars are like the sea, and the destiny is like the tide. Crossing Yan's voice sounded beside GLUO, like a sigh and grief. GLUO opened his eyes again, and everything in his sight had changed. In front of his eyes, the vast grassland could not see the horizon, as if the wind singing a ballad passed by his ears, warm and familiar. Above the sky, the night was continuous, and the stars were as bright as chess. In the deep night, there was no human habitation or lights in the wilderness. Everything seemed to be always silent, and no one had ever been here. From afar, the boundless darkness permeated the distance. The night was too dark and deep, vaguely indicating ominousness and despair. And above the zenith, the stars that should have been messy seemed particularly orderly here, just like the circular light strips in the conference hall. Countless stars formed different constellations, surrounding the entire sky. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. The 12 zodiac signs are neatly and clearly arranged in the sky. Apart from these 12 signs, there are no other stars. But unfortunately, except for Aries, which is all shining, the stars of the other signs are a little dim, grey, and misty, as if they have lost their souls. GLUO, it's time to say goodbye. Crossing Yan appeared beside GLUO silently. At this time, both of them have turned into souls. Under the same night sky, their relationship has changed dramatically. GLUO, the power of Aries is immortality, which includes the creation of the body, resurrection of the dead, and all the abilities of this immortality category. 10 years ago, I fought to the death with you at that time. Normally, if you have all 12 powers, you, with Aries, can wear me out. But you don't. At that time, you didn't have the most difficult ability of immortality. As long as my attacks hurt you, your combat effectiveness would be weakened, and you might even be killed by me. Crossing Yan was no longer interested in making up the battle 10 years ago, or her pride did not allow her to engage in meaningless deception. Aries. GLUO looked up at the stars that were as bright as fireflies, and suddenly thought of the dream a few months ago. That time, he and Tang Ruoxi went to the suburbs to eat roasted whole lamb. He fell asleep on the table and dreamed of a little boy with full spirit. At that time, he was only 7 or 8 years old, with big and bright eyes, as if they were full of cleverness and mischievous emotions. He squatted in the corner, using a magnifying glass to gather sunlight and scald the hard-working ants to death. Now think about it, the dream was actually true. The young but proud GLUO really gave him the most life-saving power of Aries. Just because GLUO needs strength. What a fool. GLUO's mood was indeed a bit complicated. If there had not been this transgression in the timeline, the little boy who controlled the power of the 12 constellations could have completely defeated Crossing Yan and created a different future. It's a pity that such a future has nothing to do with the current GLUO. You ask about the return date. There is no date. GLUO and the soul state raised his arm, his palm facing the starry sky, as if he wanted to grab something, and slowly clenched his palm. In my name, the stars, return to the world. There is no return date, and there will be no return date. In a trance, GLUO seemed to see again the starry night, when he made the vow. He was once the star spirit of this planet, the child of the world's will, and the messenger of Allah walking on the earth. But now, he will withdraw from these positions, and become anew himself. So, above the sky, the stars collapsed, and the night sky exploded. Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. Except for Aries, the 11 dim constellations exploded one by one, like a heavy hammer, smashing this crumbling world and causing it to fall apart. GLUO, go, to welcome your new life. Crossing Yan stretched out her hand towards the collapsing starry sky. GLUO turned his head and looked at her. In her expectant gaze, GLUO's soul form began to rise into the sky, as if falling into the abyss. At this time, thousands of stars in Aries began to fall like meteors, and like attracted birds, they flew towards GLUO's soul. GLUO, an era is over. Crossing Yan stood on the ground that was beginning to break, looking at the figure in the sky, constantly absorbing the falling stars, with a smile on her cheeks, and a little sadness. The last trace of the person who killed her will now be eliminated by time. In a way, the hatred between the two has come to an end. Because of her, he blew up his own sky blade, causing the 11 powers he held to collapse, leaving the world with the power to fight. But at the same time, he also left a backup, handing over Ares, which represents the power of eternal life, to his future self. In this way, he can fight against her who may break the seal and reappear in the world. GLUO, you will never think that I, who died in your hands, will be resurrected in a new posture, and I will also become your contractor, guiding you to face death. Crossing Yan recalled the boy who killed her, with some sighs on her face. An era of star spirit blessing is really over, and next, it is the story of mortals. Return date, there is no return date, then, go back. Chapter 429, Eternal Life. In the dark night with snow and wind, in a pit with a diameter of 1 kilometer, the young man holding the star-colored spear closed his eyes and took a long breath, as if undergoing a transformation. Silently, pure white streams of light overflowed from his brows, one by one. These streams of light were like exhaled breath. After a circle in the air, they returned to GLUO's body along the blood vessels and meridians, and wandered back and forth in his body. As time went on, the streams of light exhaled by GLUO became more and more numerous. They were like weaving and burning, leaving GLUO's brows, drilling into his body, and finally merging into his body and disappearing completely. From the time the streams of light overflowed, Crossing Yan, in the state of soul, returned to the outside world. She floated in the air, quietly waiting for GLUO to absorb this legacy and complete his transformation. Heaven's blade killing, the gun of destiny that controls gravity. Crossing Yan is its spirit, and GLUO is its holder. GLUO, who was born in this world, where the source power is fading, does not understand the meaning of the 3 words Heaven's blade at all, nor does he understand what kind of existence it is. Just like now, the weight of killing is not something that humans can lift. It can be seen as a concept, the embodiment of a law. What really allows GLUO to pick up Heaven's blade killing is actually not his strength at all, but his belief. As the holder of Heaven's blade killing, GLUO can use killing to adjust gravity at will. This sky spear can be as heavy as 1,000 pounds or as light as a feather. However, all of these require unimaginable mental strength and source power. Now GLUO is just a rookie of the 3 blue steel rank, and it is impossible to control it. Therefore, in GLUO's hands, Heaven's blade killing is just an extremely sharp spear. Its real power can only be used with the help of Crossing Yan. The blade of heaven is something that humans can possess, and the destiny is never something that humans can bear. Only the gods can bear the destiny, so the only ones who can fully control the power of the blade of heaven are the gods. If the destiny of the blade of heaven's Uanian sword is to protect, then what is the destiny of the blade of heaven slayer? Crossing Yan looked at the darkness spreading in the distance, with a worried and uneasy expression on her face. All of this made Crossing Yan feel an irreversible cause and effect. 10 years ago, Gluo, who was in the state of a star spirit, almost beat her from beginning to end, and even dissociated his blade of heaven in order to kill her. But why did he only break her body, but not destroy her soul? It can even be said that he magically controlled the power that was enough to destroy the world, destroying her weapon and body, but leaving her soul intact. Then, he tore open her soul leisurely, and the side that represented the evil was sealed and suppressed by him, while the side that represented the good was deliberately sealed in a fragment of the heavenly blade, and placed in the depths of his soul. If there was no plan, Zingian would never believe all this. Heavenly blade killing had just been cast, and Zingian couldn't wait to let Gluo give up, return date, and even used Sukinghan, an important existence, for this. It is conceivable how uneasy she was in her heart. That's good. Gluo now has completely broken away from the past. Although Zingian was still uneasy in her heart, she slowly calmed down her restlessness when she looked at Gluo at this moment. At this moment, the pure white light finally stopped flowing from Gluo's eyebrows, and the light that flowed out before had long been absorbed by Gluo. After a long breath, Gluo finally opened his eyes again. Because of the long time in consciousness, Gluo's pupils were a little scattered. After a while, he was completely awake. At this time, Gluo had already let go of the star-colored spear. He had returned to his origin, but he was different. His dark eyes had turned purple-blue, and his black hair had turned purple-blue like the source of star power. It was fine at ordinary times, just like wearing cosmetic contact lenses and dyeing his hair. But once the source power was used, Gluo's eyes and hair were as gorgeous as special effects, showing the brilliance of stars. And the original talent, return date, also became eternal life at this time. This is the general term for the power of Ares. In fact, it is composed of hundreds of abilities. Among them, it includes the ability to create the body, adapt to the environment, be immune to diseases, be immune to toxins, not be able to age, have an infinite lifespan, and be resurrected instantly. In general, the abilities included in this eternal life are very simple, which is literal immortality. The really scary thing is that Gluo can't die, even if he wants to. Alas, that idiot actually gave me Ares. Gluo felt a new self, and felt a little happy and a little angry. The ability of immortality is completely different for the strong and the weak. When he asked for the ability, he actually asked for Ares, only because he was an Ares. As a result, one dared to ask for it, and the other dared to give it, which led to the loss of immortality and the death of the person in the battle with Crossing Yan. The enhancement of the ability of immortality is all in the body. Gluo was a little helpless. He thought that the power of his entire Ares could enhance his combat ability, but now he felt that it was just a simple immortality and physical enhancement. Before, Gluo's 6 attributes of the body were 200 of ordinary people. Now that he has obtained the power of immortality, it is very simple to enhance it, and it has doubled again. The stars in the sky of Ares directly made Gluo go from the initial position of the blue steel level to the peak of the blue steel level. The improvement of the level, coupled with the blessing of the new source of talent, Gluo's single attribute has become 840 strings. With this level of physical ability, plus the physical strength granted by immortality, Gluo feels that something is not right with him now. That's right, something is not right. Now when Gluo fights with ordinary evolvers, he doesn't even need to release source power for defense. He can rely on his physical ability to withstand the source power attack. After all, his flesh, blood, skin, and bones have long been soaked in source power. Coupled with his powerful defensive ability, he is simply a human-shaped beast. Gluo, how is it? How do you feel? Crossing Yan's attitude towards Gluo at this time seemed more intimate. GLUO has completed his new life thoroughly as she wished, so the past grievances should also be over. It feels okay. Although the possibility of messy operations has been lost, this absolute immortality still gives people great courage. Chapter 430, The End of Humanity. The new original talent named Eternal Life allowed GLUO to obtain the absolute ability of immortality, and his physical attributes were strengthened to 4 times that of ordinary evolvers, while also possessing extremely strong defensive capabilities. Well, not bad. Now I finally have the momentum of a strong man. Crossing Yan circled around GLUO, with a satisfied look on his face. Although GLUO, who gave up, returned 8, lost the possibility of regaining the past, what he has in his hands now is actually not worse than before. Only if GLUO gives up the blood of the star spirit can he truly obtain the power of crossing Yan. Heaven's Blade Killing has just successfully appeared, proving that the contract between GLUO and Crossing Yan has been finalized, and the reconstructed Heaven's Blade has also been recognized by this universe. Afterwards, GLUO pulled up Heaven's Blade Killing, proving his qualifications as a master, and his beliefs and will are the same as Crossing Yan. As for the perfect development of killing, it proves that GLUO can perfectly accept Crossing Yan's power, and Crossing Yan's blood in his body has been revived. These 3 are both prerequisites and tests for GLUO by Crossing Yan. Now that GLUO has completed Crossing Yan's test, Crossing Yan told him the last secret, guiding him to give up the returned 8 and gain a new, eternal life. GLUO, congratulations, you have perfectly awakened the silver bloodline. Crossing Yan bowed, looking elegant and pure. GLUO glanced at the killing floating beside him, but did not reach out to hold it immediately. What is silver bloodline? Well, it is the bloodline of creatures that transcend the mortal world. Crossing Yan had completed her plan at this time, so she was not in a hurry. She was waiting for Sukinghan to finish her macup and go on stage. For example, humans start from awakening their original talents, like caterpillars in cocoons. After 3 years, they finally awaken the source power and transform into butterflies. Do you know what this is? Well, Black Iron Bloodline. GLUO still has a clear definition of bloodline, just like the descriptions in various fantasy novels. The children of powerful people are always very talented. As the saying goes, a dragon gives birth to a dragon, a phoenix gives birth to a phoenix, and a mouse's son will dig holes. Bloodline is a kind of power that is constantly changing, and inherited in genes. Wrong. There is no bloodline. Crossing Yan snorted very proudly. The smile on her face was a bit hateful, but it was also so cute that people wanted to pull her cheeks. Where did you humans get your bloodline? Maybe the children of 2 evolvers have a higher source force adaptation index and are more likely to awaken the original talent, but that's all. They are both very likely to become evolvers, so it's not called bloodline. Bah, this can only be said to be a good talent. Talent and bloodline are 2 different things. Talent needs you to practice, but bloodline is just lying there without practicing. When you grow up, you will be so strong. Crossing Yan's answer directly opened up a new world for GLUO. Is bloodline so cool? So, is this the strong 2nd generation? Is the silver bloodline strong? GLUO is still far from the concept of children. He just wants to know what position this silver bloodline he awakened is. Is it strong? It's okay, right? Crossing Yan waved her hand, and the sky spear in the air flew directly to her side. Crossing Yan in Seoul State sat down on it, just like sitting on a bench. You are now at the peak of level 3 blue steel. When you advance, the 3rd of the 8 gates of the human body, the gate of life, will open. The evolution it brings is called initial awakening. In the source power, you wake up to your true self, are born as a human being, and are reborn from the mortal world. Then, you connect with the world. But, I think you have felt it now, the limit of human blood, the shackles of nature. In fact, it is precisely because of the encounter with the true self that the warriors at the peak of level 3 blue steel can truly feel that level 3 blue steel is the end of human evolution. Going forward, there is no way for humans. 50-40 strings of source power, this is the limit that the human body can accommodate. The sum of the 6 attributes of strength, agility, physique, spirit, soul, and blood. 1260th strings, is the end point of mankind. Although even if we take one more step forward, we will reach the realm of level 4th silver, but this step, it is impossible for humans to take by themselves. What Crossing Yan said was the truth that had been proven in their world for thousands of years. Compared to the Earth, where the source power had just recovered, Crossing Yan's world had already reached a point of evolution that was unimaginable to Earthlings. Level 3 blue steel is the limit of humans, but those level 4th silver that I met, Gluo certainly did not question Crossing Yan's words, but unfortunately, Crossing Yan was not an open-minded person. She glared at him fiercely, as if warning him not to interrupt casually. Gluo, the peak of level 3 blue steel is the shackles that have always existed since the birth of mankind, and it is also the end point of the human race. Because we are human beings, we cannot cross it. This is the destiny, so what can we do? After Crossing Yan regained her body, Gluo bought her a mobile phone. She spent most of her time searching and looking around, and she did learn a lot about the Earth. But the more she learned, the more she sighed. To be honest, the source power of your world was exhausted too early, which is a pity and a bit sad. As I know, the ancient saints of the Earth world, Confucius, Mencius, Laozi, etc. Each of them has reached a level in thought and spirit that cannot be imagined by future generations. But they are mortals after all. They will grow old and die. If the source power has not disappeared, or if there is some kind of practice in your world, no matter how difficult or narrow the road is, as long as there is a road, these ancient saints can take one more step forward, and they can go forward countless steps. How far they can go in the end, no one knows. It's a pity your world doesn't have it, so this first step towards transcendence is out of the question. I'm really looking forward to it, and yearning for it. If such great beings can cultivate source power, they will be able to easily reach the peak of level 3 blue steel. After that, what methods and means will they use to take another step forward and enter level 4th silver? This possibility is really exciting. Although Crossing Yan has always been very proud of her world, she also showed a respectful expression when talking about the ancestors on Earth. Perhaps, in Crossing Yan's world, the source power is surging, and every human being is immersed in the source power, and almost all physical strength can easily reach 10. However, physical strength cannot make up for the weakness of the soul and spirit. It is for this reason that the number of realm warriors in Crossing Yan's world is rare. Chapter 431, Bloodline. The source of power has strengthened the existence of wild beasts and wild souls too much. It is too difficult for humans to survive and practice. Therefore, humans need to be more united, and every sage and ancestor is the glory of the human race. Crossing Yan's tone at this time undoubtedly revealed her concern for the human race, or indirectly proved that she is also a human. At least, she was a human before. Then, how can humans be promoted to the 4th silver level? Gluo has now reached the pinnacle of the 3 blue steel level. He is not in a hurry for the next level, but his curiosity is indelible. Gluo, humans have limits. If you can't cross the limit, what else can you do? If you want to move forward, stop being a human. Crossing Yan's answer was a bit like a joke. Gluo thought Crossing Yan was joking, and even couldn't help laughing, but unexpectedly, Crossing Yan not only didn't laugh, but was very serious. Gluo, this world has source power. There are evolvers who use source power, and there are also wild beasts whose element coexist in their flesh and blood, and whose source power flows in their bodies. If humans cannot transcend the limits of their race, then if they absorb the blood of wild beasts and become only half human, can they take a step forward? This is the answer obtained by the ancestors of our world. So, in the tens of thousands of years since then, the peak level 3 blue steel rank warriors in our world gave up their identities as humans and chose to merge with the blood and power of wild beasts. They were finally able to break free from the shackles of their nature and grow their own source crystal. Crossing Yan emphasized that this was their world's method, as if telling Gluo that humans must have other methods. It's a pity that they couldn't find them in their world. This step forward means stepping into the sky and never returning. After all warriors in the realm of the Supreme Being go against the will of heaven and live towards death. Each rank represents a new realm of life. The gap between them is as deep as the sea, the fate is contradictory, and the cause and effect are in conflict. Crossing Yan's words sounds simple, but if you think about the meaning carefully, it will make people a little creepy. In order to advance to the 4th silver rank, humans have to give up their human identity and absorb the blood and power of the wild souls, so as to condense source crystals in their bodies. Is such an existence considered a human being? It is definitely impossible to be a pure human being, which is only half a person. Does it make sense here? What's more terrifying is that such an existence must have powerful power, but what is their view of pure-blooded humans? Is it contempt or disdain? Or protection and expectation? Is there only this way? At least in our world, there is only this way. Crossing Yan's tone was firm, and Luo understood almost instantly that she had also gone through this process. How strong must Crossing Yan be to be able to force Luo, who was holding the heavenly blade Zuanian sword, to death in disguise? She must be above 4th silver rank. Luo, every wild beast's source crystal contains the wild beast's most fundamental bloodline and indelible half-soul. In order to become a 4th silver rank warrior, humans have to fuse the wild beast's source crystal, absorb its bloodline and power, let it become their own disaster corpse, accept the wild and primitive bloodline and power, so as to form source crystals in their bodies. Crossing Yan did not hide anything from Luo, and she told Luo without hesitation that the news was enough to sell at a sky-high price. To be honest, Luo, I don't know that these unique knowledge of our world will spread to your world. But what is certain is that the people in your world are still in the toddler stage. Crossing Yan, is it possible that in your world, you are not the only one who escaped? Luo actually didn't care too much about these things before, but at this time, the relationship between the two has been established, and Crossing Yan no longer hides it, and many things worth pondering are exposed. Why, the Earth world has only been revived for 10 years, and the entire power system has been built, and it is exactly the same as the power system of Crossing Yan's world. It would be strange if it is not plagiarized. Moreover, this knowledge has only appeared 10 years ago. Before that, let alone the source of power, even superpowers did not exist. Therefore, Luo's conjecture seems to be flawless. Luo, I don't know the answer to this question. Crossing Yan and Luo talked so much. Of course she was also very curious about the situation in the Earth world, but she could not simply draw a conclusion. Why? Because my memory is incomplete. Crossing Yan stared at Luo, enunciating each word, as if a knife was cutting Luo's body. 10 years ago, you defeated me, and tore my soul in half. Now I only have half of my soul and half of my memory. Tell me, how do I know? Luo felt that he had stepped on a landmine. Luo's razor-like gaze was really hard to bear. Luo scratched his hair and immediately changed the subject. Crossing Yan, let's start talking about blood. You haven't finished yet. Blood is a fragment of the truth engraved in the genes. It is both a power and a knowledge. Crossing Yan's fingertips drew a circle in the air, and then cut it in half horizontally, as if telling Luo that blood refers to the body and spirit refers to the soul. The highest level that your world has encountered now is probably the 6th gold rank. This is certainly not the limit of a realm warrior, but it can only be said to be the limit of creatures with the concept of human beings. Above that, it's inhuman. That's right, above the 6th gold rank is the heavenly rank. And anyone who can reach the heavenly rank will awaken the black iron bloodline. Crossing Yan's answer scared Luo. Above the 6th gold rank is the heavenly rank, and only the heavenly rank strong can awaken the black iron bloodline. Then doesn't the silver bloodline mean above the heavenly rank? Luo, how much do you despise yourself, or do you think that just anyone is worthy of me signing a contract? Crossing Yan rolled her eyes without hiding her face. She no longer had the energy to scold Luo for his ignorance and belittlement of himself. A warrior at the heavenly rank will definitely awaken the black iron bloodline, and a warrior with the black iron bloodline will definitely become a warrior at the heavenly rank. The two are interdependent and harmonious. Your situation is rare, but it does exist. From inheritances to adventures, there are many low-level warriors with the black iron bloodline. Their common feature is that their various attributes are far higher than those of ordinary warriors at the same rank. To put it quantitatively, a warrior with a black iron bloodline has twice the attributes of an ordinary warrior at the same rank. A warrior with a silver bloodline has 4 times the attributes of an ordinary warrior at the same rank. A warrior with a golden bloodline has 8 times the attributes of an ordinary warrior at the same rank. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 432 Shadow Power. Oh so, I have indeed awakened the silver bloodline. GLUO also understood at this time that the so-called bloodline is actually an indicator of rank. A warrior in the heavenly realm must have the black iron bloodline, which is from cause to effect, and the black iron bloodline must reach the heavenly realm, which is from effect to cause. So, the reason why humans have reached the top of the 3 blue steel rank is that their bloodline is not good. Finally, I'm not too stupid. Crossing Yan floated down from the sky spear made of star crystals, and with a wave of her white and tender little hand, killing, flew back to GLUO. GLUO, our internal problems have been solved, and now, it's time to deal with the enemy. So, urgent? GLUO did not hold the spear immediately. He turned his head and looked at the dark night with a gloomy expression. At this time, because crossing Yan showed Skyblade killing in the sky, the dark clouds gathered at the top had been washed away, revealing a vast ring of starry sky. Under the frosty moonlight, a misty figure was slowly approaching. The girl was not walking fast, and she would even stop from time to time, occasionally rubbing her forehead, as if enduring discomfort. GLUO, unfortunately, Sukinghan is beyond help. Crossing Yan was not at all surprised by Sukinghan's appearance, or rather, she, as one of the driving forces, created the current scene. She had exhausted her source power and mind in order to capture Mu Yingluo, and she was extremely weak. The erosion that had been suppressed by her took advantage of her weakness and completely controlled her. That was the god of desolation. As his first apostle, you have a trace of his source power. In the whole world, you are the only one who can resist this erosion. The others are hopeless and will become monsters. So, don't think about holding back. Her consciousness, her rationality, her emotions, her memories, and her power have all been swallowed up by darkness and transformed into the power of disaster. GLUO, although I don't want to say this, I'm sorry, Sukinghan is dead. Crossing Yan knew that GLUO cared about Sukinghan very much, so her warning to GLUO was more like a reminder. It is impossible to save those who become the apostles of the god of desolation. Sooner or later, they will be eroded and become his minions. And now, Sukinghan was indeed devoured by darkness when she was weak. Under the dark night, the kind and stubborn girl had changed. The dark source power lingered around her, and the terrifying pressure that made people tremble was constantly emanating from her. Under the erosion of the power of the gods, Sukinghan had lost her normal consciousness. Her eyes were cold and violent. When she looked at GLUO, it was as if she was looking at prey. At this time, the poem of winter and poem of spring on Sukinghan's hands still maintained a pure blue color, not polluted or eroded by the darkness, but its light had dimmed. Why is it like this? GLUO looked at Sukinghan, who was gradually turning into a monster, and his heart felt uncomfortable, as if it was under a heavy pressure. Sukinghan had obviously avenged herself, and Mu Yingluo had been rescued, but why did she fall into darkness instead? GLUO, this is fate. No one can change it. When she chose to accept the power of the desolate god, this price was already taken from her. Crossing Yan floated beside GLUO, looking at the mutating Sukinghan with indifference, without any change in her expression. Just like sealing the 2 6th level gold relics, Poem of Winter and Poem of Spring, the pitch black crystalline carapace began to grow from the shoulders, and in the blink of an eye, it completely wrapped Sukinghan's arms. Then, the black crystalline carapace began to spread upwards, like a leaf falling into the water, and the girl was quickly completely wrapped. Even the head was not spared. The forehead and eyes were sealed, leaving only the nose and mouth exposed. Then, the pitch black source power surged out from the back of the girl, turning into a pair of huge wings. Just an invisible source power fluctuation lifted Su Qinghan up to the sky, like a god ascending the stairs. GLUO, be careful. Su Qinghan has now completely mastered the power given by the god of desolation and darkness. Her source power has been completely transformed into shadow source power, and she also has the ability to bite and devour souls. It will be troublesome if she is it. That's really troublesome. GLUO grabbed the right hand to the side of his body and directly grasped the blade of heaven, killing. At this time, in order to fight against the first apostle of the god of desolation and darkness, Crossing Yan had already given her power to GLUO without reservation. So, the state called killing came again, and GLUO's pupils turned into the vertical pupils of a giant dragon, and like his hair, it overflowed with purple blue starlight. From the elbow of his right arm forward, GLUO's bones, flesh, and skin gradually turned into a state similar to crystal, and the brilliant purple blue color of the stars flowed in it, just like the dazzling sea of stars in the distant Milky Way. GLUO finally understood why Crossing Yan had tested him before, because the so-called killing was to borrow Crossing Yan's power, and Crossing Yan's blood in his body would be completely activated, and the enhancement brought about was completely exponential growth. No matter how strong GLUO was, it would be doubled directly. So, at this moment, GLUO, who had silver blood, felt the power of gold blood. That was 8 times stronger than the body of a human blood evolver of the same level. GLUO held the 3.5 meter long sky spear in his hand, and even felt that he could pierce through everything with one shot. At this moment, Su Qinghan in the sky also felt the power of Crossing Yan. Her eyes were hidden in the crystal carapace, but she still cast her gaze like a substance. Crossing Yan, die. Su Qinghan's voice at this time could no longer be heard as a human voice. Her whole body was hidden in the dark crystal carapace, and the turbulent source power formed a ring of glory around her, emitting a dark evil light. With us, the power of the gods in the underworld. Whispering, Su Qinghan raised his hand and waved it down. The dark shadow source power like ink instantly turned into a crescent-shaped huge source power air blade and flew out. The air blade composed of the source power was more than 10 meters long, like a long wave, completely covering GLUO in the pit. However, the next moment, there was no roar of source power collision. GLUO just raised the sky spear in his hand, and the huge source power air blade was instantly blown up. The air wave was completely in the opposite direction. It was as if there was an invisible wall in front of GLUO, blocking everything. Su Qinghan, you really make me angry. GLUO had made up his final decision. He looked at Su Qinghan on the zenith, and his roar rang out along with his passionate emotions. Chapter 433 Dragon Shadow. In the roar, GLUO gritted his teeth, his face full of stubbornness and determination, but anyone who had seen him knew that his expression meant he was going to kill someone. GLUO, let's start. Crossing Yan, who was in the soul state, twisted like a fluttering butterfly at this time, with an expectant smile on her face and a fierce look in her eyes. Okay, let's start. GLUO held the star-colored sky gun in his hand. Without saying a word, he clearly felt Crossing Yan's thoughts through the connection of the contract between the two. So, gravity reversed, and GLUO's body began to rise into the air, like a submarine floating up from deep water. At this moment, the purple-blue starlight in GLUO's vertical pupils was overflowing, and his pupils and irises seemed to merge into one, flashing the purest star color. That was a color that this world did not have, and should not have. The humans in the earth world had never seen this kind of pupil color from the wild souls and wild beasts. Only Crossing Yan knows the origin of this eye color. In their world, there is a kind of ancient and legendary creature, and the old people tell the old legends that cannot be known whether it is true or not. Legend has it that when the disaster comes, a messenger from heaven appears. Her body is like star crystal glass, and her eyes are like the Milky Way. It is a star dragon, a creature that was born from the star world, and traveled and grew in the endless universe. Desolate Godming, since you want war, then I will give you war. Hundreds of meters in the air, GLUO stood straight, as if standing on the ground, and his voice was hoarse, as if he was announcing something. But at this moment, Crossing Yan's power in Heaven's blade killing also responded to him. As if time was accelerating, GLUO's hair began to grow rapidly and continuously until it stopped at his waist and back. The long purple-blue hair has a fluorescent color, and countless star fragments like light dust continue to scatter. GLUO, this is the real annihilation. Crossing Yan's fierce voice sounded like a roar beside GLUO. After that, the sky spear made of star crystal suddenly emitted a bright light. The light was not dazzling, as if the light of the stars gathered together. Then, these speckled stars began to gather, as if they were called. The light of these stars flew behind GLUO, as if they were piecing together some images. When the number of stars reached a certain number, the lines formed by the faint light began to connect between these stars. Almost in an instant, a dragon shadow composed of twinkling stars appeared behind GLUO. This dragon shadow condensed by the stars was about 100 meters long, with purple-blue smoke lingering around its body, constantly emitting huge pressure, and looked like a legendary creature in mythology. The dragon constructed by the stars and smoke seemed like a living thing. The dragon raised its head, as if it was about to flap its wings and fly. The terrifying pressure and majesty came out majestically. At this time, GLUO, who was floating in the air, was like a mouse and an elephant compared to the dragon made of stars and smoke behind him, but there was a real connection between the two. Roar. After the construction was completely completed, the dragon made of stars and smoke actually roared. The roar was like thunder, and the air around it was shaking. Let everything begin. At this moment, GLUO, whose power suddenly increased, felt that he was fearless. The huge power that suddenly expanded even made GLUO feel that he could tear the earth apart. Star. GLUO thrust the kill in his hand forward, as if it was a call to action. The torrent of star power began to overflow from kill and gathered on the blade of kill, as if the colors of the nebula were hovering on it. Clouds. Then, GLUO's right hand pulled back. As GLUO pulled, as if the bowstring of a bow and arrow was pulled, the nebula on the sky spear suddenly rotated and gathered, completely wrapping up the 1.5 meter long spear blade of killing, like a real star source force, moving continuously like a rotating storm. Breath. With GLUO's loud shout, his right hand suddenly thrust forward. At that moment, the star source force gathered and gathered on the spear blade of killing, surged up, and rushed forward like a sharp arrow suddenly shot. The nebula-like source force flashed with the color of destruction, turning into a sharp blade streamline like a raging wave. Dark destruction at the other end. At the end of the sharp blade streamline formed by the star source force, Sukinghan was still floating in the same place. She could obviously dodge, but she did not choose to dodge. The next second, Sukinghan raised her head, as if she saw something. She stretched out her hand and clenched it, and the shadow source power formed a long sword in her hand. Then, she suddenly raised the black long sword, and the dark source power began to gather. She just waited stiffly, waiting for the moment to return. GLUO could almost feel that Sukinghan was staring at the breath of nebula. She just waited like a machine, and when the time was right, the blade chopped down. So, the source power drawn by the long sword turned into a huge blade, falling like an inverted C. The long sword with misty colors was a full 40 or 50 meters, and it was about to split a mountain when it fell. Boom. In the sky, the streamline of the star-shaped blade and the huge shadow long sword finally met in the middle distance between the two people. A huge roar sounded, and then the shockwave of destruction began to vibrate and spread. Even at an altitude of more than 200 meters, the fluctuations caused by the source force still affected the ground. The frost and snow on the ground exploded instantly, and the sickly weeds were swept up, and gravel and ice chips flew all over the sky. The shock wave swept farther away, and several cracks appeared on the side of the dam, which looked as if it was about to fall. And this was not a real fight. The first test ended here. GLUO and Sukinghan stood face to face with each other. Both of them were unharmed. Obviously, everything just now was just a draw. But as GLUO said, since the war has begun, it is necessary to decide life and death. So, the next second, the figures of the two people disappeared at the same time, and the two people in the source force protection flew towards each other like two cannonballs. Boom. Just like the sound of a car accident, it spread in the air. The sky spear and the long sword clashed with each other. The star power and the shadow power seemed to form two beasts biting each other, entangled and colliding with each other. After the first attack, Gluo and Sukinghan rushed towards each other at the same time. Gluo thought that he had an advantage in physical strength and should be able to suppress Sukinghan in a fight. However, the result was that Gluo could not control his suddenly increased physical ability. The excessive speed even made Gluo feel afraid of falling, so he had to restrain some of his strength. Chapter 434, Bull-shaped flying out. Gluo restrained his strength, but Sukinghan was unreserved. The girl was hidden in the crystal shell and had lost all emotions. The power attribute of the peak evolvers of blue steel rank should be around 210 strings on average. Gluo himself has silver blood, which is 4 times that of a normal evolver. In addition to the doubling effect of the killing transformation, the power attribute alone has 1680 strings, which is almost the same as that of the peak evolvers of 6th gold rank. However, at this moment, Sukinghan, who was already at the peak of 6th gold rank, at least doubled his physical ability after being eroded by the power of the desolate god. In terms of physical ability, the fight between the two should be the result of Gluo being crushed. Fortunately, at this time, in the distance behind Gluo, the dragon shadow of stars and clouds was connected to Gluo's back through 12 fine streamlines. The help it gave Gluo was endless source power. That was crossing Yan's true power. Gluo could use the vast star power, and even crossing Yan in the soul state assisted Gluo in the battle, which made the close combat between the two of them go back and forth. Gluo, be careful on the right side. Crossing Yan knew that Gluo did not have much combat experience, so at this time, she was not in a hurry to decide the outcome, but tried to train the soldiers so that Gluo would be familiar with this way of fighting. It must be said that crossing Yan was really painstaking, and she was really too courageous. In Gluo's first training, she dared to let Gluo fight Sukinghan, who did not know the foundation. Of course, it can also be said that crossing Yan and Gluo had no choice. Sukinghan had been controlled by the desolate god, and she had to die. It's simply exhausting. Gluo held the star-colored sky spear and blocked the gun body on the right side without hesitation. Then a black shadow appeared on his right side and slashed at his chest with a knife, but was blocked by Gluo's sky spear. However, the difference in strength was fully demonstrated at this moment. Gluo clearly blocked it, but Sukinghan's overwhelming strength still knocked him out with one knife. At an altitude of more than 200 meters, Gluo was like a cannonball, flying straight through the sky and crashed into a hill with a bang. Under the wind and snow, the hill seemed to be bombarded, and a muffled sound rang out. The soil and rocks on the hillside splashed, and a large pit more than 10 meters deep was sunken. Damn idiot. The source power on Gluo's body lingered like a ring, and it looked like he was wrapped in a bubble, which was full of brilliant source power, which was both earthquake resistant and collision resistant. Gluo, don't be afraid of getting hurt. As long as the source power protection is not destroyed, you can't get hurt. Ah, I know. Gluo climbed up from the hole on the hillside, and the opposite gravity made him rise to the sky again. At this time, Sukinghan was stunned in place like a puppet. She held her forehead with her hand, and her thoughts seemed to be in confrontation. Gluo, don't be anxious. Get used to the rhythm of the battle with her first. Although Sukinghan has been forcibly pushed to the heavenly ranked or realm, she will not use her own power, and is not much stronger than you. Crossing Yan was more tired than Gluo at this time. Gluo could not control the power of heavenly blade killing at all, so he had to let Crossing Yan take charge. Crossing Yan had always been the one who controlled the gravity levitation. At the same time, she not only had to pay attention to Sukinghan's offensive, but also had to guide Gluo to attack at the right time. I know. Gluo was also in a mess now. He was just a second Black Iron evolver before. Fighting was all about moves and strength. He had never fought a war with source power as the main attack. At this time, there was no fancy moves between Gluo and Sukinghan. Both sides just condensed source power and strength, collided directly with each other, then retreated under the effect of the reaction force, and then contacted again. It was like two knights on horseback, constantly charging at each other, maintaining a cycle of distance, charge, collision, and then distance again. Blue steel rank warriors can release their source power, and since then, the form of battle has undergone earth-shaking changes. Once the two get close, it is a consumption of source power between the two. The mutual attack of source power is like both sides strangling each other's neck, waiting for the other to collapse first. This kind of fighting method is not bad between low-level warriors. After all, both sides have little source power, and the consumption of each other will soon determine the winner. But for Jialuo and Sukinghan, this consumption method may have no end, so the two of them will attack each other at all costs. Sukinghan. Jialuo was like a golden scale swimming upstream, and the star-colored source power illuminated half of the night sky. The source power condensed on the blade of the sky spear, as if shining with Jialuo's killing intent to win. At this time, feeling Jialuo's killing intention, Sukinghan, who was in a daze, finally reacted. She waved her right hand, and the blade condensed by the source power in her hand instantly began to crystallize, and turned into a long sword made of black crystals. Facing Jialuo's thrust from bottom to top, Sukinghan spun the long sword in her hand, pushed her body backwards, and slashed horizontally. In the white wind and snow, Sukinghan's dark source power showed a texture like swamp mud, which seemed to be rolling with resentment and misery, giving people a kind of pain burning in the soul. And Jialuo, not advancing but retreating, this stab went forward. Ding. The sound of the weapons clashing was particularly crisp. Almost at the moment of the confrontation, Sukinghan's black crystal longsword broke, but Jialuo also flew out again. In the head-on collision, although Jialuo was not hurt by the slash, the power of Sukinghan's slash still reached him. Jialuo, who rushed into the sky, was like a baseball that was hit and flew away. He retreated backwards in a straight line again, unable to stop. Boom. Sukinghan, who was forced to the heavenly realm, was unable to use the source martial arts, because she lost her mind, but she simply used the source power for attack, which was enough to shake the world. The power of the heavenly realm warrior was too terrible. Jialuo fell from the air, and crashed into the dam with a loud bang. The concrete gravity dam was like a bubble, and it instantly shattered into a celestial flower. Jialuo's body smashed the outer wall of the dam, and did not stop, but continued to retreat inside, almost smashing everything inside. I was scared to death. Fortunately, the source power protection was not broken. Jialuo's state at this time looked like a volleyball that was stepped into the ground. He supported the sky gun in his hand, and stood up from the ground. The collision just now almost caused Jialuo to crash through the entire dam, and he was only a few walls away from being completely penetrated. Fortunately, Jialuo did not lose face so much, and stopped by means of unloading force. Although the action was not very glorious, fortunately he was not injured. Chapter 435 Coordination. Of course, Jialuo was unscathed in such a big commotion, not because his body was so resistant to beating, but because the source force protection around him was so strong. Bronze level warriors, the source force all flows in the bones and internal organs, only protecting the important vital parts, and there is no protection outside the body. Black iron level evolvers, only a thin layer of source force flows on the surface of the body, although it can block knives, guns and bombs, but the protection of source force is not strong. Blue steel level evolvers, after being able to release source force, the source force around the body usually lingers in the form of mist. Although it is an all-round protection, the source force protection method is mainly repulsion and elimination. Silver level evolvers begin to be able to compress and condense source force, turning it into a liquid-like existence, greatly increasing the protection ability. Sub-gold level evolvers, the control of source force is one step closer, and they can compress and condense source force into a state similar to substance, and the protection effect is similar to armor. Gold level evolvers, whose ability to control the source power has reached its peak, can easily compress and condense the source power into a real material state, showing an appearance similar to that of a crystal, but can switch back to liquid or gaseous form at any time, which can be said to be perfect. However, none of the above situations apply to Jialuo at this time. At this time, the star-colored source power on Jialuo's body lingered like several intersecting and rotating rings. From the outside, it looked like Jialuo was in a bubble, which was filled with the source power of the mist. It was both shock resistant and collision resistant. The outer layer directly resisted the attack, while the inner layer removed the force. It was perfect. And this kind of protection can only be done by a Xianwei realm warrior. It involves the elemental manifestation of the source power, and it has both offensive and defensive capabilities. Facing a non-Xianwei realm warrior, it is invincible. It's a pity that Jialuo is now facing a half-baked warrior who has indeed entered the Xianwei realm. Xingyan. I was hit like a ping pong ball. I'm so angry. In the midst of the smoke and dust, Jialuo pulled himself out of the wall. His source power protection was not broken, and he had no scars on his body. This level of impact could not hurt him. It's hard on his self-esteem. Being hit by Su Qinghan like a ping pong ball, every time, Jialuo would be hit and fly away. Even if he would not be hurt, he would be angry. Even Jialuo could see that Su Qinghan was not in the right state at the moment. She didn't hit him with all her heart, but the result was still a mess. Jialuo, don't panic. Let's change our ideas and change the division of labor. Xingyan came in from the hole in the dam at this time. There was no anxiety on her face. Obviously, there was still a way. What division of labor? Jialuo walked out of the dilapidated ruin step by step. He held the star-colored sky gun in his right hand and looked at Su Qinghan in the sky with his erect pupils. His brows couldn't help but frowned. Xingyan, tell me the truth. What's wrong with Su Qinghan now? What else can it be? It's just that the consciousness of the main body is struggling, but it's too late. Xingyan was not surprised by Jialuo's performance. After all, from beginning to end, Su Qinghan had no real threat to him, so he was not in a hurry. She was not in a hurry either, just grinding slowly. Jialuo, let's divide the work now. Analogy to the game, that is, you are responsible for general attacks, and I'm responsible for skills. Launch skills? I have a hammer skill. You don't, but I do. Xingyan, tell me the truth. What are you trying to do? Jialuo looked at Xingyan with his eyes, and the girl in the soul state curled her lips, as if she regretted that her kindness was framed. Okay, I believe you. And then, what should I do? Jialuo was also holding his breath. He felt that he was being forced to do something. He was only an evolver of the second Black Iron level before, and he didn't know how to fight at such a high level. Jialuo, go over and fight her now. Don't burst out your source power. Just test the waters. Okay. Jialuo looked at Su Qinghan floating in the sky and stepped forward like a lightning whip to meet the stopped Su Qinghan. This time, Jialuo did not condense the source power on the spear blade, but simply used his strength to attack Su Qinghan. Without the violent source power fluctuations, Su Qinghan seemed not to notice and covered his forehead on the spot. Zin. At that moment, under the effect of gravity, Jialuo's body was like an eagle, and the purple-blue spear blade of the sky spear stabbed towards Su Qinghan without hesitation. However, when the star-colored spear blade was about to pierce Su Qinghan's chest, she crossed the long sword first. Jialuo's spear blade rubbed the sword spine of the crystal blade, and the edge was deflected, but once again made no progress. Jialuo saw that his attack was completely ineffective, but he just pursed his lips, pulled his palm on the gun, and then swung it violently. The more than 3-meter long sky spear drew a huge circle under Jialuo's round wheel. Su Qinghan was near him at this time. The girl looked sluggish and seemed to have no reaction, but she twisted her body and dodged Jialuo's attack by a hair. Jialuo, it seems that Su Qinghan struggled quite hard. If you don't use the source power, she really won't react. Crossing Yan floated around Jialuo, observing seriously and complaining without scruples. Jialuo couldn't care about crossing Yan. He was concentrating his mind now. He just saw the opportunity to attack. So, Jialuo suddenly raised the sky spear in his hand and chopped it down. Su Qinghan raised his long knife and blocked the blade with a choking sound. Then, Jialuo raised his foot and kicked the gun, and then the reaction force pressed the tip of killing down, and then the counterweight blade swept out a terrifying arc that was difficult to detect. However, Su Qinghan's perception ability was like a ghost. She seemed to have expected it. The long sword in her hand stood up on the spot, and it just happened to block the dagger-like counterweight blade. In this situation, GLUO already understood that he could not defeat Sukinghan by himself without the source of power in close combat. If he wanted to kill her, he had to use a more overwhelming force, Crossing Yan's power. Crossing Yan. This won't work. Don't worry, Crossing Yan, you bastard. In order to break the stalemate, GLUO finally made a new move. He chopped forward with all his strength. Sukinghan held the long sword horizontally and blocked it with a clang, but GLUO used all his strength to only make her tremble. At this perfect gap, GLUO suddenly held, killing, with both hands. He turned the gun blade over, letting the counterweight blade face up, and the gun blade face down. Then, GLUO raised, killing, high, and when he was lifting it up, the star-colored source of power began to gather rapidly on the sky gun. It was like a painting composed of millions of lights. The blue gun body of Kill was lit up by the star-colored source of power, and Sukinghan instantly felt GLUO's movement. He moved his body forward and rushed towards GLUO in an instant, but at this time, GLUO was already ready to attack. Chapter 436 Forced. At that moment, GLUO used the counterweight blade at the end to hold down Sukinghan's sword, and within 1 second, he injected as much source power as possible into the spear blade. Then, GLUO twisted his body and thrust Kill out with a backhanded spear technique. At that moment, it was as if fireworks exploded in the summer night. The Kill in GLUO's hand suddenly lit up with a dazzling light, and the star-colored source power began to quickly dissipate outward like a spring. The source power was in a smoky state with light, and the colorful mist was beautiful. Of course, Sukinghan easily dodged this attack, but GLUO's purpose was not here at all. Everything had just begun. When the source power completely permeated the gun body, GLUO suddenly pulled back the sky gun, twisted his wrist at the same time, and drew a circle like a gunflower in the air. The source power that was deliberately dissipated was like the seawater sucked by a whale, and was quickly compressed onto the sharp blade of Kill. At that moment, GLUO pointed the misty sky spear forward, and the star power of the dragon on Kill almost condensed into liquid. Then, like a jet of high-pressure water gun, GLUO completely released the power in the spear blade. Like a flood, the star-colored power turned into a stream of light. Sukinghan, who could only react passively, finally missed the best countermeasure. She didn't even have the chance to dodge, and could only gather the power on the crystal blade. The black longsword was raised forward, and the ink-colored power was also flowing on the blade. The purple, blue and black source forces were constantly fighting each other in the air like water and fire. Although Sukinghan tried his best to stabilize his body, the source force streamlines kept impacting the crystal blade, and Sukinghan was also pressed down to the ground little by little under the huge force. Crossing Yan, what the hell are you doing? It was agreed that you would use your skills. GLUO was very angry now. Crossing Yan, this cunning villain, didn't know what she was doing. She clearly said to divide the work, but at this time, she didn't use her skills. If GLUO didn't know any source martial arts at all, it would be impossible to hurt Sukinghan by simply using source force. He had to use powerful source martial arts. GLUO's current fighting style was completely to consume his own source force and carry out rough source force bombardment, just like ordinary people punching without any rules. But the mysterious energy of source force is not used in this way. If you compare source force to water, the ordinary use is to pour a basin of water out. The use of source martial arts is to spray water in the mode of a high pressure water gun, and even more so, to use high pressure water jet cutting technology to turn water into a water knife. These three are all uses of source power for attack, but the final effects are very different. GLUO, don't worry, it's not time. Yet Crossing Yan was flying around GLUO at this time, assisting him in staying in the air and moving. But other than that, she just watched and did nothing, paddling and sliding into the Pacific Ocean. GLUO, think about it carefully. Our situation is like Ultraman fighting a small monster. How can you use skills at the beginning? You have to use a flat attack to knock down the bloodline and status first, and then use a set of skills to take it away. Crossing Yan stared at Sukinghan very hard at this time, as if she was waiting for her to change, but other than that, she was just perfunctory. At this time, the star-colored brilliance was gathering into a bright streamline, and the surging source power intended to tear everything apart. The annihilation effect of the star source power had been increased to the maximum. But at the top of the other end, Sukinghan blocked the black crystal longsword in front of him, and the source power like swamp mud rose up, and the streamline of starlight hit the longsword, like a scorching flame melting metal. The huge thrust generated by the source power cancellation made Sukinghan unable to stop falling to the ground, and finally fell into the ground with a loud bang. But it was only to this extent. The gorgeous purple blue light flow ended after more than 10 seconds, and the sharp blade of killing fell silent again. GLUO in the sky was burdened by the release of a large amount of source power, and was panting and sweating. But on the side of the ground, Sukinghan was still unharmed, but her feet plowed a long mark on the ground. She raised her head silently, and no emotion could be seen between her cheeks covered by black crystals. Unharmed? It's too outrageous. GLUO looked down at Sukinghan, who was smashed into the ground by the source power streamline, and there was only seriousness on his face. In GLUO's plan, consuming such a large amount of source power release, at least Sukinghan should be affected. Even if he is not injured, it is better to be embarrassed. However, when everything was over, GLUO found helplessly that Sukinghan was not injured at all. Zingarn, what are you waiting for? GLUO turned his head and looked at the dragon shadow formed by the stars and clouds in the distance, and guessed Zingarn's plan in his heart. The dragon shadow of 100 meters is almost the height of a normal 33-story building. It is very conspicuous in the sky at an altitude of 200 to 300 meters. But at this time, the dragon formed by the stars and clouds stopped there quietly, but 12 tiny rays of light extended from each joint and connected to GLUO's back. Those ethereal lines look like the strings used to control puppets. Such a big and cool dragon shadow stopped in place, just like a doll without power. It was completely a decoration. But how could GLUO treat it as a decoration? It must be Zingarn's calculation again. At this time, GLUO also felt that Sukinghan didn't want him to kill Sukinghan immediately. She seemed to be using his hand to force Sukinghan to let her completely release the power of the desolate god. GLUO, don't worry. Precious ingredients need enough cooking time. You have to watch her cook little by little under the fire before you can use your chopsticks. Don't be impatient, otherwise it won't taste good. Crossing Yan's face did not show any anxious look. She brought GLUO down from the sky and landed back on the ground, standing opposite Sukinghan 200 or 300 meters away. At this time, Sukinghan's state changed again. GLUO's attack seemed to wake her up. Sukinghan no longer covered her forehead. When she looked at GLUO, she finally had a normal killing intent. I found crossing Yan's existence. I decreed to eliminate it. Although Sukinghan spoke haltingly, her movements were no longer stiff. At that moment, Sukinghan pointed the crystal blade in his hand toward the sky, and the muddy shadow source power began to surge out, like ink dropping into clear water and spreading out. Shadow snake. Following Sukinghan's emotionless voice, the huge shadow source power began to gather in a spiral, and in just a few breaths, it turned into a huge black snake. Chapter 437 Shadow Snake. Under the dim moonlight, a black giant snake more than 20 meters long formed in the air. When it opened its huge mouth, it was larger than a person. The source power like mud and ink flowed on her body, emitting a threat that the living feared the most. Diving shadow. Sukinghan suddenly leaned down, turned his wrist, and stabbed the narrow black crystal long knife into the ground. At the same time, the huge snake shadow in the air also turned downward, like a fish jumping into the water, and jumped into the ground. It's funny, escaping underground is the same as diving. GLUO gave crossing Yan next to him a look, secretly adjusting his physical condition. To be honest, GLUO has never had the ability to fly, let alone flying and fighting in the sky. He is uneasy, even if he doesn't have a place to stay. A rash air battle can't get an advantage at all, so GLUO deliberately beat Sukinghan underground, intending to pull her to the same level as himself, and then defeat her with rich experience. But now, it seems that Sukinghan has more than one trump card. In silence, GLUO took a step back, but at this moment, a huge shadow snake suddenly emerged from the ground, as if jumping out of the sleeping Russian class, and rushed towards GLUO wildly. Although he had already prepared himself mentally, the huge tongue like a truck still made GLUO's pupils shrink suddenly. But GLUO had the source force to protect his body, so he was not panicked. He just held the back end of kill with both hands and stabbed at the shadow snake without hesitation. In the star-colored streamer, the 1.5 meter long sky spear blade seemed to have turned into a rapier, stabbing straight at the center of the shadow snake's eyebrows. But just when GLUO thought that he could fight the shadow snake head on, the shadow snake unexpectedly stopped in midair. To the naked eye, the speed of the shadow snake's forward rush was so fierce that GLUO also attacked according to its trajectory. The collision of the scales and jade spear blades was almost inevitable, but the shadow snake had no entity at all. It stagnated in midair, and the sharp blade of kill did not touch it at all. And this, of course, is not the end, but the real beginning. The next second, the ink-colored shadow snake twisted its body, and the most fierce pounds came in an instant. GLUO pursed his lips, stepped on the solid ground with his feet, and under the protection of the source force, he had fully integrated into the battle. The black pounds GLUO did not dodge at all. The spear blade flipped, and a source force empty blade swept out, and at the same time the spear blade slammed down. The black snake, which was more than 20 meters long, was completely composed of source force. There was no concept of volume and mass at all. It seemed to be very afraid of the sky spear in GLUO's hand and dodged again. Bang! With a dull sound, the blade of kill smashed straight into the ground. Because GLUO's power was too great, half of the sky gun sank into the ground. But GLUO didn't have time to pay attention to this kind of thing, because at this time, the shadow snake in the air paused for a moment, and its head actually split from the middle, turning into two heads, biting GLUO on the left and right. Damn, it can still split. GLUO was still calculated. He didn't care about anything else. He stretched his right hand forward, grabbed the middle of the handle of the sky gun, and blocked the snake head on the right with a shot. But at this time, the snake head on the left had already bitten his spherical source power protection. The snake fangs of the shadow snake were extremely huge, and the dirty black source power was extremely corrosive. It bit on the star-colored source power protection, making a harsh click, but the annihilation effect of the star source power was not vegetarian. Although it was attacked, the 4 black teeth were gradually erased. Although GLUO was being attacked at this time, this was also the result he wanted, so GLUO didn't care about the source power protection that was constantly cracking, but attacked with attack, holding the sky spear in his right hand, and stabbed the body of the shadow snake. Squeak, squeak. The terrifying power of killing was undoubtedly demonstrated at this moment. The blue edge of the blade directly broke the surface scales of the shadow snake, and instantly tore out a wound more than 1 meter long. Unfortunately, the body of the shadow snake that was cut open was simply the ink-colored source power. The black snake was also ruthless at this time. It didn't care about its own injuries at all. It just held GLUO in its mouth, and began to push forward frantically. GLUO, with Sukinghan's continuous injection of source power, this shadow snake will not be destroyed at all. Crossing Yan's reminder can be said to be insincere. GLUO was frantically destroying the black snake at this time, but Sukinghan injected infinite source power in the distance, and this black snake was simply immortal. Instead, GLUO was pushed back by the black snake all the way, and finally crashed into the lower end of the dam with a bang. The solid concrete outer wall of the dam was as brittle as chocolate in the face of such a huge force. The creepy body of the shadow snake was flying in the air, and its head was swinging, making it impossible for GLUO to concentrate his attack. Boom. 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 Under the unlimited force of the black snake, GLUO finally broke the surface of the dam, and entered the inner room full of corpses. At this time, the shadow snake did not stop, pushing GLUO to crash through various rooms, making GLUO's source power protection constantly bear the collision and pressure. Shadow snake, soul toxin, injection, failed. In the distance, Sukinghan, who was inserting the long knife into the ground, suddenly pulled out the crystal blade and stood up. This shadow snake as long as there is source power injected, will recover infinitely, and will not stop until death. Although she is only made of source power, in fact, her fangs have soul toxins. As long as it touches the body of any creature, it will inject the toxin into the soul, and the damage to the soul is almost equivalent to real damage. But now, facing GLUO, whose source power is almost endless, the fangs of the shadow snake can't break through GLUO's source power defense, no matter how hard it tries, and there is no chance to inject soul toxins. Therefore, Sukinghan must change his way of attack. Soul corrosion begins. Sukinghan's voice is still intermittent, but at this time, her figure has disappeared from the spot, running towards the dam like a flying swift. On the other side, the shadow snake also consciously stopped bumping around at this time. It bit GLUO and repeatedly passed through the dam, as if it wanted to turn a big cake into honeycomb cheese. The solid concrete gravity dam seemed to have turned into chocolate, and the collapse and destruction could not be stopped at all. But without Sukinghan's source power injection, GLUO's attack finally showed its effect. Black couldn't resist the dissipating fear, and finally loosened his fangs, and pulled away from GLUO. Hey, now, it's my turn. GLUO now felt that he was fooled. Even if he knew any source martial arts, his attack power would not be so weak. Simply releasing the source power is like pouring water out in basins. The only effect is that the source power cancels each other out. There is no confrontation at all. GLUO. Not good. Run. Chapter 438 The Origin Revealed. What? GLUO was just about to beat up Shadow Snake, but before he could stand firm, Crossing Yan suddenly shouted at him to run. But GLUO was now at the edge of the dam, with a thick concrete barrier behind him. Where could he run? At this time, GLUO raised his eyes and saw the dark figure at the top. In the gradually subsiding snowstorm, Sukinghan held the black crystal long knife in both hands. On the dark and edgeless crystal blade, the source power was lingering like scattered dust. On the outer layer, the liquefied source power formed a constantly twisting vortex, and the space was twisted in the violent source power fluctuations. Damn it. Even though GLUO was surrounded by the source power, he felt a creepy sense of crisis. He didn't even dare to care about Shadow Snake and Sukinghan anymore. He just turned around and tried to use the sky gun to open up the road behind. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom, boom. The vortex-like shadow source power exploded after being compressed to the limit. The terrifying power that destroyed everything instantly blew most of the dam into pieces. It looked like a mousse cake that had been bitten hard. The ice layer that had been cut off was torn for nearly 100 meters, and the water actually overflowed again. At this time, GLUO had been blown away 300 or 400 meters. Although he was prepared, the strongest spherical source powering at that time was still blown to pieces, but fortunately, the power had disappeared by half. The source power that was lingering like a haze blocked the damage involved, so that GLUO just fell into the ground without any injuries. Is this a roller coaster? GLUO climbed up from the ground. Crossing Yan floated beside him and was working on reconstructing the source powering. But what GLUO didn't expect was that the Shadow Snake, which had just gained nothing, actually jumped out of the ground at the first time and bit GLUO with 4 new fangs. While biting, the Shadow Snake made the most powerful impact in history. GLUO's body was instantly knocked into the ground, as if embedded in the mud. Damn, you think I'm easy to bully, right? GLUO was also angry at this time. He directly detonated the cloud-like source power around him, and with a huge ring-shaped wave, he directly lifted the more than 20-meter-long Shadow Snake away. The source power that GLUO detonated was almost equivalent to the total source power of a 3 blue steel revolver. The ground within nearly 100 meters seemed to roll like boiling water, and the grass and snowflakes were mixed between the soil and rocks, like coffee-flavored milk ice cream. GLUO, I suggest you hide first. Crossing Yan jumped out at this time, and gave GLUO a very useless suggestion. GLUO glared at her fiercely, but the girl just shrugged her shoulders. Crossing Yan, just say it directly. How long do you have to wait? GLUO started to run away angrily. Crossing Yan followed him slowly, and spoke in a veiled manner. It's almost done. As the saying goes, lure the snake out of its hole, and cut the grass at its roots. The source power of the desolate god in Sukinghan's body must be drawn out completely. Only by killing her can we get the most perfect and complete source crystal. Bah. If you had this plan, why didn't you say so earlier? If you had said so earlier, would you have fought as hard as you did just now? Of course not. So although Crossing Yan is now in a soul state, her situation is quite special. She is not afraid of the soul toxins of the shadow snake at all, so she is not in a hurry to escape. Instead, she turns her back and helps GLUO. GLUO, be careful, the shadow snake is going to spray venom. What? GLUO was running, and because he didn't hear Crossing Yan's words clearly, he turned his head to take a look. Just this one look scared him. At this moment, the more than 20-meter long shadow snake has flown into the air again. Its elders are broken, and the black and sticky soul venom sprays at GLUO like a high-pressure water gun. Fuck. Although GLUO didn't know whether the source power protection could withstand it, he didn't want to touch this bro, so he rolled to the side and changed his path. Almost immediately after, the soul venom sprayed by the shadow snake passed by like molten iron and fell on the ground and directly turned the land into a bubbling swamp. In the crisis, GLUO no longer lost his mind and completely burst out at his full speed. Although the shadow snake's magma spewed continuously, GLUO was faster and perfectly avoided the disgusting venom. However, the soul venom did not splash GLUO at all, but fortunately, the source power protection can resist this kind of toxin, but the consumption is very large. GLUO, come on, hold on for a while, the shadow snake can spray soul venom. This is a sign of the emergence of the original power of the desolate god. Hold on for a while. Persistence is victory. Crossing Yan, as the king of mouth cannons, has become a cheerleader. Hey, I won't do it. I'm just happy. Just playing on the other side. The soul venom in the shadow snake's body does not seem to be endless. After it was sure that there was no way to attack GLUO, it stopped spitting. Instead, it burrowed into the ground like a diving fish and disappeared. Crossing Yan, where is Sukinghan? Relying on the desperate sprint, GLUO felt that he had distanced himself from the shadow snake. According to GLUO's observation, the speed of the shadow snake was leisurely, and it was unlikely to catch up with him. Here, on top, Crossing Yan's smile seemed a little bad. She pointed to the sky. GLUO immediately reacted and changed his route without hesitation, running towards the building on the side. It was an abandoned house, and the highest floor was only a dozen meters high. Because the entrance had to be detoured, GLUO did not hesitate at all, staring directly at the source power surrounding it, and crashed into the dilapidated building. Boom. The solid concrete wall was like a bubble in front of GLUO. GLUO rushed into the house, just to get a temporary respite. However, Sukinghan in the sky, after losing GLUO's trace, launched an attack without hesitation. In the dark night, Sukinghan was like a hawk swooping down, and the ink-like liquefied source power lingered around her, dragging a long tail flame like a blazing flame. If the next few moments slowed down, we could clearly see everything at that time, then we would definitely imagine the scene of the shell flying out under the push of the primer. The dilapidated low building had only 6 floors, and it was penetrated from the top. The bursting source power was like a raging wave caused by a storm, and the thick concrete floor seemed to have turned into cotton candy, rotting layer by layer. The old walls seemed to have turned into fragile white paper, and the shock-absorbing structure was completely useless. The outer walls, bedrooms, living rooms, kitchens, one wall after another shattered under the action of the source force, and there was no way to stop it. So, GLUO, who was at the bottom, didn't even have time to catch his breath before he saw the roof explode and a body fell in front of him, with broken steel bars and cement blocks flying everywhere. He seemed to be blocking the center of the explosion, and his figure trembled under the fluctuation of the source force. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 439 Calculation. In the black mist and light and shadow, if GLUO hadn't had the source power to protect him, he might have turned into a pile of minced meat in a few breaths. but relying on the endless source power to repair, Gluo actually carried it all the way. Although his body was constantly pushed back, he was not injured at all. When the force of the push finally weakened, Gluo crashed into a dilapidated house with a bang. At the end of the sliding track, Gluo smashed half of the bed with a thud and finally fell into the broken wood of the bedboard. Cough cough cough. Although Gluo was not injured, he felt like there was a breath pressing on his chest. After coughing for a long time, Zogson felt a little relieved. At this time, the originally damaged 6-story building had been destroyed into a sky-high dust. In the depression of more than 10 meters on the ground, Sukinghan's figure was vaguely visible. Is this the heavenly position? Gluo's current physical strength is roughly equivalent to that of an evolver at the peak of the 6th gold level. Crossing Yan's endless source power allows him to squander it unscrupulously. However, compared with Sukinghan, Gluo's gap is still huge. Fortunately, Sukinghan has no IQ. Gluo panted and dared not stay any longer. He supported the ground and stood up from the ground. However, almost as soon as Gluo stood up, the roof of the house was torn apart in an instant, and the dark body of the shadow snake appeared again. However, Gluo was not a vegetarian. He jumped onto the roof and the sharp blade of kill directly tore the jaw of the shadow snake, but the shadow snake twisted its body and was frightened and flew into the air. The wounds on its body also recovered quickly, and the wounds that seemed to be fatal quickly disappeared, and at the same time, it distanced itself from Gluo. Zingayan, what is Sukinghan doing? Gluo, who felt an inexplicable breath, stood upright on the roof of the house. He held the star-colored sky gun tightly, as if waiting for something. In the dust, the shadow snake had already flown back to Sukinghan. Sukinghan jumped to the top of the shadow snake, holding the black crystal blade upright, and then suddenly stabbed into the head of the shadow snake. At this moment, the dark crystal blade seemed to fall into the water and directly merged into the body of the shadow snake. The giant snake, which was more than 20 meters long, split into 2 heads as if by mitosis, and became a real 2-headed snake. At the same time, the source power around the shadow snake surged up, and the energy in the state of brilliance seemed to gather like dark clouds. The source power, which was so strong that it was almost liquid, lingered around it. The soul toxin gradually merged into the source power, making the shadow snake more threatening. Unlike before, the shadow snake not only had an extra head, but it just had a body. At this time, it could even release and mobilize the source power, just like a living creature. Soul, corrosion, implementation. Sukinghan jumped off the head of the 2-headed snake, and was a little sluggish again, like a puppet that had consumed too much energy. But unlike Sukinghan holding a shield, Shadow Snake was in a state of taking to the water. Its body fell to the ground, like a piece of paper on fire. It sank directly into the ground, and disappeared from Gluo's sight. Zingayan, what do you want to do? Gluo frowned. He turned his head, and looked into her star-colored eyes. But all he saw was endless depth. Gluo could not see any emotion in Zingayan's eyes. I just want to devour the trace of the original power of the desolate god in Sukinghan. Zingayan didn't care about Gluo's observation and spying at all. She just smiled and floated in the air happily, talking leisurely. Gluo, you have also felt it. It is precisely because of the trace of original power of the god of desolation, the world eater Tikatera, and the second apostle of Siwen, the god of desolation, that blade of heaven murder was able to be recast. The original power of the god of desolation is really too important, so important that it is worth it for us to take any risks. The second apostle's trace of original power has given us such a great improvement, and what can the first apostle with even stronger original power bring us? Gluo, the world eater Tikatera, is also on guard. Now Sukinghan has not exerted her full strength at all. She has been on guard. If she has no chance of fighting us, she will self-destruct and destroy that trace of original power to prevent us from getting it. Therefore, we must be patient and show weakness to the enemy. Crossing Yan finally stopped hiding it. Gluo listened to her answer without saying a word, but just looked away. At this time, there was a sudden thunder-like sound underground. The muffled sound kept repeating, and slight vibrations began to appear. As time passed, the vibrations became stronger and stronger. The shadow snake had disappeared for more than 10 seconds. With such a long accumulation time, it was not difficult to guess what it was doing. However, as a source of power, it could be completely integrated into the soil. It was meaningless for GLUO to attack the ground. Crossing Yan, the trust I give you now is what I want to give you. Please don't let me down. GLUO clenched the kill in his hand and jumped directly from the house. At this time, the power deep underground was erupting. Boom. It was a sound like a galloping army. The land within a few kilometers around was shaking slightly. Unlike ordinary explosions, this vibration gave people a palpitating pressure. As long as you stood there, you could clearly feel that this was definitely not a movement caused by human power. It could even be called a natural disaster. Boom boom boom. As if an earthquake was brewing, the 6-story building on the side suddenly collapsed in the tremor, and then a black shadow snake that was so huge that people could not resist drilled out from the ground. If the previous shadow snake could still show traces of a living creature, then the shadow snake at this time has completely turned into a monster. Its whole body seemed to be made of mud and earth and rocks, and the surface of its body was flowing with black mud like soul venom. The two symmetrical heads were twice as large as before, and looked like a bulldozer covered by mud and rocks. The two-headed snake, whose body expanded from 20 meters to nearly 50 meters, did not immediately attack GLUO. It seemed to be observing GLUO. It coiled upward along the side building. The whole building was like a haystack strangled by iron chains, and it completely became a twisted shape. Broken glass and steel mixed together and fell everywhere. The 50-meter long mud shadow snake climbed up the 6-story low building in almost the blink of an eye. At this time, its two heads were raised, and most of its body was still on the ground, and had not crawled out. The next moment, the shadow snake twisted its body and a deafening sound rang out. The 6-story building collapsed, and was destroyed in an instant, becoming its first sacrifice, before it pounced on GLUO. Chapter 440 Ruins. The giant shadow snake has become a physical entity. It twists its body like a flowing mud, and its two heads stare at GLUO. Compared with it, the surrounding houses seem like broken matchboxes, and the telephone poles and street lights are as ridiculous as matchsticks. Everything along the way is easily crushed and knocked down by it. GLUO stood on the flat ground, with the sky gun in his hand overflowing with star-colored light. Crossing Yan's soul body floated beside him, and the light in her pupils was blazing. The blade of Heaven's Blade Killing is integrated with the gun body. The material looks like some kind of jade, but it feels like metal to the touch. The sky gun is just the weight that GLUO is most comfortable with, needing the calmness and depth, as if the lead and Makup have been washed away. It breeds a kind of power that cannot be described in pale language. GLUO, it's time to use your skills, okay? I'm waiting for you. As if to give Crossing Yan the answer she wanted, GLUO suddenly pointed the sky spear in his hand to the sky. The power in the sky blade, under Crossing Yan's urging, finally started again. Star-killer color of the stars. At that moment, with Crossing Yan's announcement, the star crystal gun body of Kill suddenly lit up with a glow, as if the night faded away, and the dawn rose. The clear and broad colors flowed in the gun body of Kill, beautiful enough to make people intoxicated. At this moment, the gun body of Kill was held in GLUO's hand, and the tip of the gun pointed straight to the sky. In the distance, the giant shadow snake was approaching rapidly. In the bright colors, time seemed to slow down at this moment. After being completely activated, the Kill in GLUO's hand turned into a bright light and rose straight to the sky. At that moment, the wind suddenly blew around, and the bright star colors burst out in the sky, as if the galaxy in the sea of stars in the universe was broken, and the gorgeous halo turned into a spreading wave. Everything seemed to freeze at this moment. From this moment on, everything changed. It seemed that the Milky Way, that had been shining for millions of years, was laid out here. The dark clouds accumulated in the night were completely dispersed. The faint moonlight sprinkled down, and the stars in the sky seemed to resonate. Within the sight, the sky seemed to be rendered with colors, turning into a deep purple blue sea of stars. The misty nebula lingered in the entire sky. The light changed from dim to strong. The wave spread rapidly, and almost in the blink of an eye, it completely submerged the sky in sight. At this time, it was natural that the giant shadow snake had no thinking ability, nor would it care about the changes in the field. It just ignored everything and rushed towards its goal. GLUO stared at the mountain like two-headed snake, gritted his teeth, and did not retreat an inch, just raising his arm, falling heavily. Starkiller Kang fell. Above the sky, bright stars were dotted, and the flickering light gathered into a vast color. A spiral storm formed among the stars. A bright light that submerged everything rose high, and then fell down. That scene was like the eye of a typhoon where the storm gathered. The colorful stars in the sky suddenly set off a raging wave, and then gathered together in the spiral rotation, turning into a falling sky spear. In the purple-blue starlight, Heaven's Blade Killing seemed to turn into a star. It fell from the high sky, and the speed was so fast that people could not react. It can even be said that when people see the star falling with their naked eyes, it has already hit the ground. Boom. The characteristic of the star element is annihilation, that is, the complete obliteration of everything. When the sky spear killing fell, it was like a nuclear bomb exploding, and everything lost its meaning. The fluctuations caused by the source force explosion were like a powerful typhoon gathered in the sea, pushing irresistible waves to spread around. The buildings built by humans were fragile in front of it. The steel seemed to turn into bones, and the buildings were swallowed by it like fat meat. And the center of all this, the two-headed shadow snake was the only target. The sky gun falling from the sky was like a sharp sword, directly piercing through its body, and then the power exploded, turning it into powder. How about it, GLUO? Cool or not? Crossing Yan was so proud at this time. She pinched her waist and looked like she was going to praise me quickly. My martial art is called Starkiller, and it was inherited from a very powerful martial artist. Starkiller, color of stars, borrows the power of the stars to increase the power of the next attack. It is a non-lethal enhancement skill, while Starkiller, fall of the blue sky, is a proper source martial art. Isn't it awesome indeed? Awesome. Although GLUO wanted to scold Crossing Yan, he had to admit that Crossing Yan was indeed awesome when he saw the surroundings that had been razed to the ground. The shadow snake, which was completely condensed by the source power, could be reborn quickly, even if only a little was left, but Crossing Yan's attack was a complete annihilation, which could be regarded as a crushing attack, wiping out the shadow snake without leaving a hair. Crossing Yan, you've already started, then Sukinghan. The power of the source of the desolate god is about to burst out. It is recommended to keep a distance. Crossing Yan seemed to have finally waited for the food to be served. She licked her lips and looked a little impatient. Okay. GLUO still remained calm enough. He took a deep look at Sukinghan, who was silent, turned around and started to run to the other side. At this time, the shadow source power representing the dark attribute overflowed from Sukinghan's body like a runaway horse. The girl floated in the air, as if she had lost her soul. Darkness, death, fear, and indescribable negative emotions were spreading from Sukinghan's body. Her strands of black source power stretched out from her back like silk threads, and woven a demon ghost behind her. The demon was only the upper half of the body, about 50 meters high, but as the shadow source power filled up, the ghost seemed to come alive and actually began to attack on its own. A claw, just a casual wave. 3 source power empty blades over 20 meters long flew out. GLUO barely avoided the most dangerous area, because he was always moving, but the environment around him was in bad luck. The huge explosion sounded like a small earthquake. Just a casual wave of the hand. The 3 source power empty blades caused damage that was difficult to describe in words. 3 half-kilometer long cracks were clearly visible, and the blown up rocks and steel disintegrated in the air. As the shock wave began to spread far away, the water tower and the low-rise building collapsed in an instant like paper lanterns, and the clustered houses were directly shattered into ruins. Only GLUO was almost unaffected. GLUO, the original power of the desolate god, has been completely revealed. Chapter 441 Ghost. Then, let's start. GLUO looked at Sukinghan, who was slowly rising into the sky, and the demon ghost behind her, that was 50 meters high, and he vaguely understood something. Behind GLUO, the dragon shadow formed by the stars and clouds was a complete hole, about 100 meters high, while the demon ghost behind Sukinghan was only half of it, just 50 meters. However, the half-body demon ghost was composed of the original power of the desolate god, and each of its attacks was extremely corrosive. By analogy, it was like a monster made of concentrated sulfuric acid. Whether it was itself, or the attacks it launched, it was extremely dangerous to ordinary people, and they must not be hurt. Desolate God, what a terrifying power. In GLUO's palm, a wisp of muddy shadow source power was constantly jumping. This was a trace of source power that he had just deliberately intercepted, but just such a small trace of source power would corrode GLUO source power 10 times that of this. At this moment, although GLUO source power is infinite, his source power protection is limited. If the source powering is really broken, GLUO will probably be corroded into bone dregs. So, let's start. Crossing Yan seemed to feel GLUO's nervousness. GLUO blinked her eyes, and the smile on her face was still bright. Starkiller shadow of the dead dragon. At that moment, as if it was a declaration, and as if it was a prayer, Crossing Yan's voice was loud and high-pitched. Following his voice, GLUO rose to the sky, as if he was falling into the abyss. The star dragon shadow, which had been silent for a long time, finally began to move at this moment. The joints of its body seemed to be formed by strands of cotton candy. The misty star source power turned into thousands of lines, weaving and condensing under some kind of guidance. Finally, it was connected to GLUO's back with 12 long purple-blue lines. Under Crossing Yan's guidance, GLUO floated in front of the shadow of the dead dragon, about 50 meters away. Following the 12 silk threads connecting GLUO, the surging source power began to be injected into GLUO's body. It felt like an inflated ball, and GLUO didn't even have room to resist. Fuck. This was the first time that GLUO felt what it felt like to have too much source power. His whole body seemed to swell up. The compressed source power had changed from vapor to liquid. GLUO's whole body was wrapped in this liquid, and he felt so satisfied that he wanted to vomit. Crossing Yan. I feel like I'm going to explode. Your blue bar is overflowing. Summon. Destruction. Let's use the skill. Crossing Yan had now focused all his attention on Sukinghan on the opposite side. The half-body demon ghost had already condensed, and now even stuffed Sukinghan into its chest, like protection, but also like imprisonment. Heaven's blade. Killing. GLUO felt that every blood vessel in his body was about to burst. He stretched out his hand and grabbed it. The sky spear on the ground instantly flew into his hand. GLUO held his weapon tightly and completely let go of the source power control. Crossing Yan, please. You guide it. As you wish. Crossing Yan and GLUO have always had the ability to communicate with each other because of the contract. The two can reach the point where they can communicate with each other as if they were using their arms. At that moment, GLUO raised the sky spear in his hand and pointed to the sky. The uncontrollable source power was stuffed into it by GLUO recklessly. The vast stars were like the sea, and the indescribable huge power was displayed on the sky spear. The shining star line connected to GLUO's back, losing more source power to GLUO. Fuck. I'm going to explode. It's okay. Although Crossing Yan said it was okay, she was actually not that relaxed. The source power comparable to the total amount of a 6th gold rank warrior was condensing on the gun blade. Such a huge source of power brings an exponentially increasing difficulty in control. The flow of source power is like a tide driven by gravity, which has become irresistible and uncontrollable. But Crossing Yan, who was just a remnant soul, relied on her own mental power to control this power, and turned it into a majestic and huge wind. Star-killing dragon breath blow. When the majestic source of power wind was gathered, GLUO suddenly pointed down with killing in his hand. The scene was like a line that divided the world and began to extend. The gathered source power seemed to have turned into a spit of dragon breath, like a strong wind blowing, whistling towards the demon ghost shadow more than 50 meters high. At this time, the half-body ghost shadow had already made preparations. It closed its claws, and the dark source power gathered into a vortex in it. At the same time, it closed its wings and created another layer of defense. The purpose is to protect the host in its body. The distance of 1,000 meters was swept away in an instant. When the fierce wind transformed by the star source power came into contact with the wings of the ghost, the collision sound was not as deafening as imagined, but rather like the sound of a rainstorm hitting the wilderness. In the first few moments, the demon ghost relied on the corrosive power of the shadow source power to barely hold on, but the fierce wind blowing was endless, and finally after 2 or 3 seconds, it could not hold on. It was like the sound of an egg breaking on the ground. The wings constructed by the source power expanded, and the power of the inward explosion broke out. The black wings instantly turned into shattered smoke and dust, scattered in the cold air. The first layer of the demon ghost's defense was destroyed, but the vortex between its claws expanded to an astonishing scale at this time. The Starstream Gale, which was based on large-scale damage, began to be swallowed by the vortex. Although some of the star source power still hit its body, making a crackling sound like pouring water on a fire, the most dangerous time had passed, and it was no longer a threat. On the contrary, there is still room for counterattack. Just like passing a basketball, the demon ghost suddenly pushed the ball of source power out, and the target was GLUO, who had quietly arrived at its side. Zingian, get out of the way. GLUO saw the instability of this ball of source power. If it was directly broken, it would cause a big explosion. The opponent would definitely distance themselves from it, and everything would be in vain. Getting out of the way was the best way. Don't worry, I'm an old driver. Zingian controlled the gravity and let GLUO change his position quickly, but the ghost's method was beyond the expectations of the two. Before the two of them could distance themselves, a huge suction force pulled GLUO over there. Does this also pull people? GLUO could feel with his eyes closed that he couldn't run away now, so GLUO simply didn't run. He turned the sky gun in his hand and threw it out directly as a javelin. GLUO, what are you doing? It's going to explode. I'm going to make it explode. GLUO turned his head and looked at the demon ghost that was trying to get around him. He used his power without hesitation and manipulated gravity as much as possible to pull it towards the center of the explosion. No one can escape. Chapter 442, Fighting. The energy ball that was a mixture of star power and shadow power was extremely unstable. It was wrapped in the power of twisting and pulling, making it impossible for GLUO to escape. But in the same way, GLUO, who had taken a ruthless move, hesitated and directly used the power of kill to forcibly pull the demon's ghost away from the escape track. Then, the tangled energy ball exploded, and half of the sky was instantly illuminated. GLUO, I understand. GLUO had already calculated that he might not be able to escape. Without crossing Yan's reminder, he spun his arms, and the star-colored power was wrapped around him, and the sky spear was pushed forward by him. Boom. The power of the explosion was almost equivalent to the combined full-strength attack of GLUO and Sukinghan, and on the eve of the explosion, the two of them attacked each other, making it impossible for the other to escape. As a result, the two were affected at the same time, and the power of the body protection collapsed in the process of resisting the explosion. The two people flying in the air fell directly from the sky. At this time, the demon's ghost was in the source power state, so it had more room than GLUO. In midair, it even slashed out a source power empty blade that was enough to cut through the mountains. Damn. This can be said to be the most dangerous moment since the start of the war. GLUO only had time to hold the sky spear horizontally and push it up with all his strength. Then, the heavy source power empty blade hit the gun body of Killing. The source power that burst out of GLUO's body surged out, and the two forces collided with a loud bang. A huge sound exploded, and the airwave even made GLUO's falling speed stagnate in midair. Boom. In order to relieve the force, GLUO finally fell into the soil, and the ground was directly smashed into a deep pit by him, but fortunately he was not injured. On the other side, the ghost formed by the shadow source power was even worse. It added insult to injury at a critical moment, and now it fell to the ground with a bang, and its posture was very ugly. Crossing Yan, get it? GLUO adhered to the spirit of taking advantage of his weakness to kill him, tooth for tooth and blood for blood, and climbed up from the ground, rushing towards the half-body demon without hesitation. At this moment, Crossing Yan also controlled the dragon shadow of the stars and clouds in the sky to descend, keeping a distance of more than 100 meters behind GLUO. GLUO also knew that compared with the ghost shadow on the opposite side, he was at an absolute disadvantage, but he was not completely powerless to resist. For a warrior of the heavenly realm, the fully unfolded shadow of the disaster skeleton, plus the original power of the completely erupted god of desolation, it is not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Under this kind of peak power, Sukinghan has become a complete carrier. She can't come back anymore. So, Gluo can't hold back, and he has no ability to hold back. He must fight hard. Star-killing charge in the soul state. Crossing Yan's mental power was transmitted along with the vibration of the source power. The star-colored sky gun in Gluo's hand was lit up, and then, the 12 star lines connecting Gluo's back seemed to be burning like flames. It was like the current flowing between thousands of households, and the light flowed between the star lines. The impact was too rapid, but at that moment, the brilliant reflection of the galaxy could be seen. So, the huge star source power flowed into Gluo's body from the streamline. Under the guidance of Crossing Yan, Gluo stepped on the ground with his feet, and the leaked source power burst into a ring, forcibly pressing the ground within 10 meters down to the height of a knee. Then, Gluo's figure instantly jumped into the air. He turned the killing in his hand violently, with the blade facing down, holding the sky gun with both hands, as if holding a hammer, and smashing it down. The 50-meter high demon ghost was too huge. Compared with it, Gluo was like a poor mouse, but Gluo fell from the sky, and the star source power burst out like an explosion. Boom. The purple-blue star power shone with brilliance and mist. When the blade of the sky spear smashed down, the power that was compressed to a terrifying degree burst out. The huge demon ghost was like a nail hit by a hammer, and half of its body collapsed downward. The sharp blade of Heaven's Blade Killing also successfully pierced into the half-body demon's body, but it was made of power as a whole, and ignored this kind of damage. Even if Gluo pulled the sky spear forward and cut its body open, the damage caused was nothing more than the loss of some power. On the contrary, when it reacted and got up from the ground, Gluo had to jump off it. Damn it, this is just like a monster made of concentrated sulfuric acid. Gluo felt how difficult it was to deal with the demon ghost. The power of the desolate god was so overbearing and corrosive that there was almost no way to deal with it. If Gluo hadn't consumed his source power to hold on, the part below his ankle would have been gone. However, in this situation, Gluo had no intention of retreating. He seemed to have lit a fire. Looking at the sleeping Sukinghan, he no longer had any scruples. Crossing Yan. Come again. Star-killing mountain waves move. Under the guidance of Crossing Yan, the blade of killing flashed again. Gluo injured the star source power that was overflowing. The sky spear in his hand spun suddenly, and then he held the lower half of killing with both hands and chopped it down like a crescent moon knife. Gluo's chopped had already condensed all the strength and source power in his body, as if he was riding on a horse, using the horsepower to smash down. Boom. The shockwave exploded, and the shockwave spread like a bell. The surrounding grass, trees, and soil were instantly torn apart, and the damaged ground cracked into a concave shape. The half-demon who had just stood up was also hit in the waist and abdomen by this blow. The burst of source power directly knocked it back more than 10 meters. Damn. I don't believe it. Under the cloudless night sky, the stars are like the sea, and the overflowing starlight shines on the dragon shadow hundreds of meters high, making the dragon shadow of stars and clouds more solid. Crossing Yan turned her head to look at the dragon shadow that was absorbing the energy of the stars, and felt the energy it was accumulating now, and gave up the idea of turning over the trump card immediately. There is only one chance. She must create a scene of a decisive kill, so that can end this battle. Gluo, don't give it time to react, keep sticking to it. Okay. Gluo didn't say much. He held killing in his right hand and pulled the sky spear to his armpit. Then Crossing Yan passed by him, and the girls will spread along with the guidance of her mental power, killing stars, chasing the bright charge. At this moment, Gluo stepped forward, his footsteps constantly beating on the ground like drum hammers. The source power seemed to wrap around him like a converging stream, pushing him forward faster and faster. Gluo's gun holding posture is the most iconic posture of charging with a gun on horseback. In his indomitable will, Gluo's action seemed to become a symbol of determination. The blade of killing, stabbed forward, and the vibration of the source power was silent, but with the dazzling light. Get the hell out of here. Chapter 443 Burning. For the first time, GLUO felt that fighting was such a passionate thing. He felt as if his soul was burning. Under Crossing Yan's guidance, he had almost no thoughts of life and death. All he had was moving forward. Heaven is on the left, warriors are on the right, and the meaning of charging is to move forward without hesitation. GLUO crossed a distance of dozens of meters in just 2 breaths. This time, he tried his best. The source martial arts called ZH Ming Chang was also more powerful than he imagined. When the blade of the sky spear came into contact with the ghost of the demon, it directly pierced her epidermis, and the blade went straight into her, but this time, it did not produce the previous explosion. In GLUO's feeling, the gun body of killing was unloaded by the chaotic source power, as if it was inserted into a torrent. The scorched air was surging and ringing. With the roar of the ghost of the demon, the black shadow source power pushed the airwave to disperse, and GLUO was forced to retreat again. The collision of the star source power and the shadow source power swept away, and the huge impact force directly swept everything around to pieces. GLUO held his body and did not fall down, but he could not help but retreat more than 10 meters. At this time, the battle between GLUO and the demon ghost was like a beast biting each other's throat. They were bleeding, but the other party was also bleeding. Every blow was a life-threatening and all-out effort. They both believed that they were the final winners, and believed that the other party would fall before their blood ran dry. The demon ghost obviously had no IQ. It just felt the existence of Crossing Yan, and followed the order of the desolate god, to kill Crossing Yan at all costs. That's all. GLUO no longer considered Su Qinghen's affairs at this time. He didn't know what level he was at now, but he understood that there was no Xianwei realm warrior in this world. In other words, if he lost to Su Qinghen today, then no one in this world could defeat her. It can do whatever it wants. Because of this mentality, GLUO no longer has the intention to stop. He can die, Su Qinghen can die, but this world cannot die like this. At least, it cannot die in Su Qinghen's hands. The surrounding area is nearly 5 kilometers in radius. The aftermath of the two people's battle has become the most thorough demolition method. The electric poles that were standing before have all collapsed, and the buildings have been collapsed. Some of the ground has been razed to the ground, and some have been pits. Arsehole. GLUO was a little tired at this time. Although the source power is endless, his mental power is limited. Even if his body is strong, he is tired of fighting and tossing with a Xianwei realm warrior. However, GLUO has no intention of retreating. Not only does he not retreat, but he continues to rush forward. The dragon shadow composed of stars and clouds is still standing quietly in the distance. It connects GLUO with 12 star lines, and once again gives him overflowing source power. In the cold air, the star-colored source power gathered like a stream. GLUO looked at the 50-meter high demon ghost, without any intention of avoiding it, and just rushed past it. Star-killing color of starstream. GLUO raised his hand suddenly and raised the killing spear blade to the sky. The source power that changed from gas to liquid was like a clear river. The source power was in a smoky state with light, and the color was mixed and beautiful. There was no need to guide or gather. The huge star source power naturally lingered around GLUO. GLUO held the high raised sky gun tightly, and slowly drew a circle in the air. The source power like a river was thus aroused and rotated into a ring above GLUO's head. Because of the huge pressure, GLUO's movement seemed a little slow. No one could be at ease with such a huge source power guidance. Crossing Yan was still adding to GLUO's attack at this time. Under her control, the newly arrived source power was like the seawater sucked by a whale, constantly gathering on the sharp edge of killing. The next second, GLUO pulled the sky spear back, and the ring-shaped source power light stream instantly hovered over Skyblade killing, making the entire spear blade light up with dazzling brilliance. Killing star color of starstream. GLUO screamed desperately, and he pointed the sharp edge of the sky spear forward. The restrained source power was like a flood that opened the gate, turning into a brilliant purple-blue light stream. This time, GLUO and Crossing Yan really used all their strength. Although the dazzling light was gorgeous, it gave people a kind of shocking pressure when a volcano erupted. This time, the demon ghost finally lost his previous leisure. He did not dare to resist, but chose to dodge. In the turbulent night, the star-colored brilliance turned into a bright streamline, and the light seemed to tear apart everything in front of it. GLUO had completely lost the ability to control the source power, but he still gritted his teeth and moved the sky gun, as if forcing it to adjust the direction of the source power streamline. The 50-meter tall demon ghost was constantly moving as if fleeing, but the terrible scene produced by the star stream followed it all the way. The scene was like a raging wave on the coast, and the steel and concrete turned into chocolate and were crushed in an instant. The soil, rocks, and gravel were turned into dust in an instant. Although the demon ghost fled at an extremely fast speed, the star-colored source power streamline still hit its body. Sizzle. The star-colored source power was like light and clouds, and the ink-colored source power was like brilliance and smoke. An indescribable confrontation was surging at that moment. The confrontation between the shadow source power and the star source power was like the battle between water and fire. If one side was not destroyed, there would be no end. Even though the demon ghost's body was extremely large, it could not control itself, and began to retreat in the dazzling source power flow line. Under the huge driving force, it directly crashed into a small hill. The forest at the foot of the hill was shattered into sawdust in the fluctuation of the source power confrontation. With a rumbling sound, the demon ghost fell heavily into the soil. Ha ha. GLUO was sweating all over his head, and even a black shadow flashed in front of him. If it was him before the source talent became eternal life, he would probably be dead now. That's right, dead. Such a huge amount of source power, even if it is just carried and used, will cause harm to the body. Long-term load will definitely kill people. GLUO. Don't stop. Crossing Yan finally lost her previous leisure at this time. Although the girl was in the state of soul, the large amount of mental energy consumed also made her state very bad. After all the source martial arts were released by her under the guidance of GLUO. GLUO was actually a carrier, bearing the pressure of the source force on the body, while crossing Yan consumed her spirit and wore out her soul. Of course, I didn't plan to just let it go. Chapter 444 The last. Although GLUO was harsh, he did not rush forward immediately. He supported the spear blade with his hands and panted for more than 10 seconds. His physical condition was still a little bit weak. Even with the blessing of the power of eternal life and the strengthening brought by killing, it was still too much for GLUO to draw the source power that exceeded the 6th gold rank realm warrior. The vast star source power in the body of the star shadow dragon was injected into GLUO's body through the 12 star lines again. This strong gift made GLUO's body tremble, and the pain intensified again. Unfortunately, there was no time to delay GLUO. GLUO, the last blow. Crossing Yan also felt GLUO's weakness. For a blue steel rank realm warrior, she really had nothing to blame. All she expected was that GLUO could hold on. Very good. GLUO seemed to be struggling against something. Squeezing the last strength of his body, he suddenly raised Heaven's Blade killing high and threw the sky spear into the sky with a standard javelin throwing action. I'm still very energetic. GLUO stared at the light of kill rising into the sky and stomped his feet on the ground. Then the ground beneath his feet broke like pulp. GLUO followed the recoil and leaped into the sky like an arrow, chasing the trajectory of Skyblade kill. Roar. At this time, the demon ghost that had fallen into the mountain climbed up again. Its condition at this time also looked very bad. It was inky black before, but now it has shown a pale grey. GLUO. Now. Of course, GLUO spun in the air like dancing, and just on the trajectory of the sky spear falling, he encountered it soaked in source power. At that moment, the dragon shadow of the stars and clouds, as high as 100 meters, was finally summoned by crossing Yan, forming a grand scene behind GLUO. In the dark night, the wind suddenly blew around. It was like the ink stains on a piece of white paper faded and disappeared. With the intersection of kill and GLUO as the midpoint, the vast sea of stars in the sky gradually faded, and the star power that was lingering like mist began to disappear from GLUO. Only the source power brilliance on the kill Gundam and turned dazzling. That scene was like the feeling from polar night to polar day. With the shaking wind, everything was gradually converging with kill as the midpoint. As if the scroll was rolled up, day and night turned, the stars in the sky were shrouded, and everything returned to reality. Kill, star piercing, star strike. In crossing Yan's shout, Gluo did not grasp kill with his hand, but spun like a dance, overlapping the sky gun with his own falling trajectory, and tried his best to kick the end of Skyblade kill. This strike pierces the stars. Gluo screamed with all his might, and the sky spear, which had completely turned into a blazing star, fell from the sky. At the same moment, the dragon shadow of the stars and clouds suddenly raised its head, and the brilliant star colors circled in the sky. The picture seemed to be a galaxy in the sea of stars in the universe, and the gorgeous halo turned into a diffuse wave, showing some kind of ancient and unchanging great power. Shadow of the woe, dragon breath. So, the dragon shadow that had absorbed the power of the stars in the sky for a long time, turned everything it made up into a stream of stars, and shot it to the earth. Roar. The 50-meter tall half-body demon ghost wanted to leave as soon as it felt the threat of extinction, but it was too late. Heaven's blade killing, under the blessing of the source martial arts called star-piercing strike, really became an existence that could penetrate the stars. The mutual blessing of speed and power made it seem to reverse the cause and effect at the moment of release, and instantly nailed the demon ghost. RR. The gun blade driven by the star power instantly pierced into the chest of the demon ghost. This time it was no longer the epidermis, but directly pierced into its body, completely and deeply. However, the original power of the desolate god is also powerful beyond the consciousness of mortals. Heaven's blade killing seemed to pierce into the swamp. Although it advanced a lot, it finally stopped. Just at the center of the demon ghost, half a centimeter in front of the sleeping Sukinghan, it stopped. Just a little bit, maybe with a little more source power input. Heaven's blade killing can pierce Sukinghan's heart, cut off her vitality, and let the demon ghost attached to her completely dissipate. However, there is no if. However, this result did not surprise Crossing Yan. She had anticipated this step long ago, so she used her trump card. At this moment, Heaven's blade killing pierced into the body of the demon ghost, forcing it to freeze in place. In order to resist this force, cause and effect, in fact, were already destined at the very beginning. In the cold night, the gorgeous star color turned into a stream of light, like pouring molten steel, pouring on the body of the demon ghost. Woo 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 rah 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 rah. This moment was the most powerful source power explosion seen on this planet in the past 10 years, except for the battle between Gluo and Crossing Yan. The earth seemed to be trembling, the sky seemed to be burning, and the frozen river quickly merged at this time, and the steam that was steaming up was like a long dragon. Gluo, the last. Crossing Yan was also overconsumed at this time, and her soul state was even a little dim, and at this time, Gluo seemed to have lost consciousness and became a free fall. Gluo, Sukinghan's death in your hands is the best outcome. I understand. In the biting cold wind, Gluo took a deep breath, turned his body, adjusted his trajectory, and faced the earth illuminated by the source of power without fear. Sukinghan. As he fell, Gluo stretched out his right arm, revealing his crystallized limbs, which at this moment showed a star-like brilliant purple-blue color. In a trance, Gluo clenched his fist, and a deep and profound light emanated from his right arm. An invisible force unfolded. It was a gift shared by the sun, moon, and stars, and it was also one of the ultimate principles of the universe. Its name is gravity. Sukinghan. At this moment of the curtain falling, Gluo seemed to have a flash of the smiling figure in front of him. Tears flashed in his eyes, and he gritted his teeth and moved forward. The invisible gravity gathered, with Gluo as the center, and all things with a diameter of 1000 meters, regardless of life and objects, gender and nature, all bore the huge gravity. At this moment, the dragon shadow of the stars and clouds in the sky finally stopped breathing, because it had used up all its strength, and the huge dragon shadow of 100 meters high disappeared silently like dispersing smoke. Chapter 445 Peace of Mind. On the ground, the half-body demon ghost shrank from 50 meters to 5 meters, in order to resist the glow of the star stream. The sky spear named Heaven's Blade Killing was still in its body, staying half a centimeter in front of Su Qinghen's heart. At this moment, dozens of meters high in the air, Gluo stretched his hand forward, opened his clenched fist, and then, like drawing a bow, he retracted his fist back to the side, from palm to fist. It was as if an invisible big hand between heaven and earth clenched, and the floating things within a radius of 1000 meters were instantly gathered under the action of gravity. Then, under the action of gravity, Gluo's falling speed accelerated by more than 100 times, and as if flashing, his figure had already fallen. Star collapse strike. Gluo seemed to be burning his life, and hammered on the tail of the Heaven's Blade Killing, with all his strength, gathering huge power. Even the space at that point was distorted. The sound at that moment was not as earth-shaking as imagined, but as crisp as a morning bell, as dull as an evening drum, and as if the stars exploded. The power to shake mountains and break peaks fell, and the sky spear that stayed above Su Qinghen's heart pierced in like a nail. Boom. As if it was the final word, the sound spread. When the power of the sky was released, the ground within 1000 meters in diameter with Gluo as the center dropped a full 3 meters. It was like a flat ground rolled by a steamroller, with nothing on it. Until this moment, the source monster wrapped around Su Qinghen finally dissipated. Her heart was pierced, and the blood flowed out, and the substance like black silk began to overflow. The Heaven's Blade Killing that pierced Su Qinghen's heart seemed to have sensed something delicious at this time. Its entire gun body was trembling with joy. The source of the desolate god and darkness that overflowed from Su Qinghen's body was taken in by it without any hesitation, without leaving any. Gluo. Under the dim moonlight, the girl named Su Qinghen finally shed her crystal shell. She lay on the ground, staring at Gluo in front of her, with a smile and tears. Gluo. I'm sorry, really, I'm sorry. I know. Gluo wanted to pick up Su Qinghen, but who knew that, as soon as he squatted down, he fell directly to the ground, and he couldn't get up after several attempts. Gluo gritted his teeth, dug his hands into the soil, and crawled to Su Qinghen's side. He stretched out his hand, pulled out the sky gun that was inserted into her heart, and then threw it aside. Next, I'll leave first. Crossing Yan had already got what she wanted, so she had no intention of disturbing Su Qinghen before she died. In other words, the soul-destroying dead and the gluttonous star spirits, desolate and fallen gods, the world-eating Tikatera, its complete ray of original power is really worth Crossing Yan's study. So, at this time, Crossing Yan, who had consumed a lot of energy, returned to kill in a stream of star-colored light, and changed the newly born Heaven's Blade back to the state of mimicking her body. Gluo, the power of the desolate god in Su Qinghen's body and soul has been completely eliminated. But as the price of elimination, only half of her soul is left, and her vitality is exhausted. It is impossible for her to survive. Crossing Yan calmly told Su Qinghen's situation, and then she seemed to be afraid of disturbing Gluo, or afraid that Gluo would turn around and cause trouble for her, so she hid far away and ran to a corner where Gluo could not see her, to study the gains of this battle. After Crossing Yan left, only Gluo and Su Qinghen were left in the huge open space. The weak Gluo crawled to the girl, sat on the ground, and trembled as he held her cheek in his arms, as if he was trying to hold back his tears, making the sound of a wild beast whimpering. Su Qinghen, I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for? What's worth it? You deserve it. I've always deserved it. Then, I accept it. Su Qinghen seemed to be unable to see anything at this time. She opened her eyes with difficulty and tried to raise her arm, but it was very difficult. Gluo stretched out his hand and held her palm. Although Su Qinghen's body temperature had always been a little cold, she could still feel the warmth. But at this time, Su Qinghen's body was as cold as ice. The only thing that had temperature was the sea blue spring poem on the back of her left hand. Gluo, I have done a lot of wrong things. I have too many sins. I deserve to die. Su Qinghen tried to use her left hand to hold back the warmth that Gluo gave her, but unfortunately, she was already exhausted and no longer had the ability to do so. It's just, I'm sorry for dying in your hands and letting you bear so much pain. Su Qinghen, you idiot, I forgive you. Gluo gritted his teeth and finally couldn't hold back his tears, but he still smiled, wanting to leave his smile in Sukinghan's last consciousness. If you say that, can't I just forgive you? You're so cunning. I am really a good person. Yes, you are a good person. I don't deserve you. Sukinghan smiled on her cheeks, as beautiful as a lily soaked in rain and dew. There have been too many killings and blood, too much sin and pain in the girl's life, but before she died, she finally let go of everything, and was able to face death calmly. She was like a diary full of sins. In the passage of time, the host of the diary died, and then the paper turned yellow and the handwriting was blurred. After experiencing the baptism of time, the paper gradually decayed, and the handwriting became transparent. Everything returned to nothingness, just like when she came to this world, alone. Gluo, it's like I had a long dream, a dream. It's really too long. Sukinghan's breathing gradually became subtle, and her voice became low. She seemed to be in a dream, and everything in her memory began to become hazy. When the original power of the desolate god in darkness merged with her, it directly penetrated into her life and soul. In order to remove these pollutions, they had to cut off half of Sukinghan's soul. Now Sukinghan only had half of his soul left, and his vitality was squeezed out. Otherwise, how could that demon ghost just now have that level of power? Gluo, it's great to meet you. Do you regret meeting me? Sukinghan seemed to have used up her last strength, and tried to touch Gluo's cheek, but she couldn't reach it. Gluo held her cold right hand, and placed it on his cheek. Sukinghan, meeting you is the happiest thing that has happened to me in the past 10 years. I am very happy. That's good. Sukinghan seemed to be celebrating, but also seemed to be sighing. Tears fell from the corners of her eyes, and she closed her eyes with uneasiness, but peace of mind. Everything was irreversibly heading towards mediocrity. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 446 Hope. The night wind was chilly, and Sukinghan's blood slowly dyed the ground red. The girl had reached the end of her life. Her arms slowly drooped, and even breathing became a kind of hardship. Just like the candlelight in the dark night swaying in the wind, the girl's thinned vitality was no longer enough to support her survival. The shadow of death had already covered her, and it was only a matter of time before she was completely submerged. But just before death came, the poem of winter on the back of Sukinghan's right hand suddenly lit up with an ice blue flash. It was as if the winter that had lasted for thousands of years had reappeared. The light-colored ice spread from Sukinghan's arm and finally completely froze her whole body. King Han. Gluo stretched out his hand and gently knocked on the ice that froze Sukinghan. A chill that penetrated deep into the bone marrow made Gluo shiver, and the subsequent spreading chill forced Gluo to put Sukinghan on the ground and slightly distanced himself. The kind of cold that was enough to stop the living instantly was really terrible. The poem of winter is activated. On the open space that was crushed into a flat surface like bricks and stones, the girl named Mu Yingluo staggered over. She looked at Sukinghan, who was frozen in the ice, and felt fear and pain. Gluo, why? Sukinghan never wanted to harm anyone, she just wanted to live. She just wanted to live. Gluo did not answer Mu Yingluo's words immediately. He just turned his head and looked at the hysterical girl, shaking his head slowly but firmly. Sukinghan, anything she did can be forgiven, but since she has chosen, she must pay the price. So, you killed her? Mu Yingluo knew that she could not fight against Gluo, but at this time, she had no intention of living, and her emotions were no longer like this. She hated him very much, hated him as much as she wanted to kill him. This is her choice, and it is also her end. Gluo did not need to answer Mu Yingluo, but he looked at the girl's shaky figure and suppressed his emotions. Mu Yingluo, Sukinghan is dead. I don't want to kill her, but she must die. You don't want to kill her either? Mu Yingluo staggered to Sukinghan's side. She pointed at the wound in Sukinghan's heart with an extremely serious expression on her face. Gluo, is this what you mean by not wanting to kill? Mu Yingluo, does this make sense? She's already dead. It makes sense. What's the point? You have to make me say that she chose to accept the power of the evil god in order to save you and ended up turning into a monster, so I had to kill her. Gluo's emotions were now on the verge of collapse. Fortunately, Su Qinghan did not die directly in front of him, but was frozen. But no matter what, Gluo's current psychological pressure was really beyond Mu Yingluo's imagination. He had tried his best to talk to her properly, but his emotions could not be suppressed at all. Mu Yingluo, the past is over. I don't want to kill Su Qinghan, but since she chose to step into the darkness, she must bear the price. Gluo, now, has she paid the price? Yes, she has been judged, and the guilt has been eliminated. Gluo didn't know why Mu Yingluo was still entangled in this at this time, but he didn't want to lose his temper with the person Su Qinghan cared about the most at this time, so he endured it. Mu Yingluo, Su Qinghan is dead. Don't dwell on these meaningless things anymore. Leave and start your new life. No, these are meaningful. Mu Yingluo seemed to finally understand something. She smiled and nodded, with tears in her eyes. Gluo, Su Qinghan is a good child. Gluo wiped his face, not knowing why Mu Yingluo brought up this topic, but nodded. Gluo, what do you think of Su Qinghan? Mu Yingluo stood in front of Gluo stubbornly, as if he didn't give her an answer, she would never retreat. Gluo had no choice but to speak his mind. I like Su Qinghan. No, I should say I love her, and will never regret it until I die. Then, Gluo, if you can, you will protect her, right? If you can. Gluo didn't know why Mu Yingluo wanted to get to the bottom of it, but after chatting with her for a few more sentences, Gluo felt a lot more comfortable. Perhaps, this is the relief of completely giving up, after accepting one's powerlessness. Then, Su Qinghan's future is in your hands. Mu Yingluo looked at Gluo's grey face, nodded with relief, then she squatted down, and placed the phone on Su Qinghan's chest. Gluo experienced the coldness released by the winter poem, but Mu Yingluo, who was far from Gluo's relief, had a calm face. However, without a sound, Mu Yingluo's knuckles were covered with white frost, and it was obvious that her limbs were completely frozen to death. However, Mu Yingluo felt that this was just a taste. She allowed the cold air of the winter poem to enter her body, and only injected the vitality extracted from her original talent into Su Qinghan's body. Mu Yingluo, Gluo actually wanted to say that you can't save Su Qinghan. Her death was not simply the dissipation of vitality, but her soul was half destroyed. Even if her body came back to life, it would only be an empty shell, and would die in a few days. However, at this time, Gluo looked at Mu Yingluo's desperate figure and watched her inject the light green vitality into Su Qinghan's chest, and he couldn't say anything. If possible, Gluo really hoped that a miracle would happen, or in other words, there was no one in the world who wanted Su Qinghan to be resurrected more than Gluo. After all, she died in his hands. Listen, the white-breathed wolves are running, the giant whales with unicorns are swimming. The land and the ocean are quiet, but they have already begun to sing the poem of winter. Mu Yingluo's state at this time can be described as a last glimmer of light before death, but she did not have the slightest fear or retreat, just exerted her last strength and recited the prophecy she knew from her friend. The next moment, the ice blue gem on Su Qinghan's right hand glowed, completely melting the ice that froze Su Qinghan and lifted the cold that froze everything. Seed of life. Revive. Mu Yingluo pressed her entire palm to Su Qinghan's chest and gave Su Qinghan all the energy that supported her activities. After receiving Mu Yingluo's final gift, the seed of life hidden in Su Qinghan's chest finally moved. This artifact, which started as a mere seed and became a 6th gold level holy relic, finally woke up at this time. Just like the passing of winter and the departure of the cold, the seeds buried in the soil finally sprouted. Chapter 447 Death. In Gluo's sight, Mu Yingluo just gave her life force to Su Qinghan. This act of pouring water into a broken bottle was actually meaningless. But the magical thing was that, after receiving Mu Yingluo's life force, Su Qinghan, who was no longer frozen, actually grew a bud on his chest. Yes, it was the kind of bud that was so small that it was barely visible, with a simple branch and 2 emerald green leaves. It didn't look like a plant, nor did it look magical. Listen, the sharks of the tide are patrolling, and the giant winged snakes are circling. The ocean and the sky are quiet, but they have already begun to sing the poem of spring. Mu Yingluo was already shaky at this time, but before she fell, she activated the aqua blue gem on the back of Su Qinghen's left hand. Then, the poem of spring woke up, and the pure water attribute source power began to flow out like a spring, nourishing the small seedling of the seed of life. And this plant growing in Su Qinghen's flesh and blood, after being nourished by spring poem, showed an incredible growth rate. Almost in the blink of an eye, the vine-like branches began to grow rapidly. These emerald green branches and leaves wrapped Su Qinghen in them in the blink of an eye, and then the branches inserted into the ground, as if they had turned into roots, and began to dig deep into the ground. The ground compacted by gravity was as hard as tiles, but the new vines easily pierced the soil, and began to stay deep. For a while, it became deeper and wider, and the surrounding ground was shaking. This is good. Mu Yingluo looked at Su Qinghen wrapped in the plant with satisfaction, and the expression on his face was relieved and lonely. Mu Yingluo, what did you do? Gluo also saw at this time that Mu Yingluo had left a backup plan in Su Qinghen's body. It seemed that there was a reason why he saw Su Qinghen sleeping on the ice bed at the top of the frost tower. What did you do? I just used the Tang bamboo slips for the ritual of resurrecting Li Xiaoan on Su Qinghen. Mu Yingluo looked at Su Qinghen wrapped in green branches with expectation, as if she was looking at her own perfect masterpiece. She had done everything she could, and the result would be left to fate. Poems of winter, poems of spring, seeds of life, a lot of vitality. This ritual involves too much blood and sin, and it is a good thing to have this ending. Mu Yingluo, it's useless. Su Qinghen is not only dead physically, but also only half of her soul is left. It is impossible for her to live. Gluo seemed to be saying this to Mu Yingluo, and it seemed to be saying it to himself, so as not to have too much hope, and then fall into greater despair after the hope was dashed. Gluo, it's okay, you don't understand this ritual. This ritual is not resurrection, but rebirth. Mu Yingluo's body shook, and she couldn't even stand steadily. She simply sat on the ground and looked at the branches that wrapped Su Qinghen, like an old farmer looking at the crops he planted. It doesn't matter if the body dies, just use the original body as material to breed a new body. It doesn't matter if the soul is broken, just use the original soul as material to breed a new soul. This ritual is built on this idea that absolutely cannot be lost. Is there really a ritual in this world that can resurrect people? Gluo told the truth. He believed that 10 years ago, he, who had the complete power of the 12 zodiac signs, could definitely do it. However, after that, 11 of the 12 zodiac powers were broken into millions of fragments and spread all over the world, forming countless holy relics and giving birth to countless evolvers. It is almost impossible to collect the effective evolvers and holy relics with the goal of resurrecting one person and finally construct a complete ritual. The world is too big, and many fragments have never been discovered or obtained by anyone, so how can they be borrowed? Gluo, your question was also raised by Tang Xujian at first. After several years of research, he finally determined that he could not perfectly resurrect a person. Maybe someone could do it, but that person must be a god, or some kind of existence close to a god. Mu Yingluo was already waiting for death at this time. She looked very calm, even relaxed. So, in the end, what Tang Xujian could do was not to resurrect Li Xiaoan, but to give Li Xiaoan a new life. Use the body as material to reshape the body, and use the soul as material to reconceive the soul. The former Su Qinghen must have died, but the new Su Qinghen will also be born from this. Gluo, this is all I can do. Her future, I'll leave it to you. I'm afraid I don't have time, which is a bit of a pity, but it's also a bit of a relief. At least, I won't see failure. Mu Yingluo seemed to have no strength to sit up. She slowly lay on the ground, looking at the bright moonlight in the night, and closed her eyes in relief. Gluo, please bury me on the windy hill in the north. I hope to listen to the voices of this world after I die. I will. Gluo looked at Mu Yingluo, who looked peaceful. Various complicated emotions were stuck in his heart. Gluo had a lot to say, but he couldn't say it after all. Mu Yingluo, you. Gluo, the new Sukinghan may not remember anything, but please give her more time. The memories ingrained in her soul will definitely guide you to fit together again. Mu Yingluo's voice became softer and softer, and her breathing became lighter and lighter. She took a deep breath at last, as if she was feeling the breath of this world. Goodbye, my friend. Mu Yingluo did not complain or curse until the very end. She just said goodbye softly, and then quietly lost her voice. Gluo slowly walked to Mu Yingluo's side, squatted down, and probed her nose with his fingers. It was already warm. Mu Yingluo, no matter what happened between you and me in the past, no matter what these things mean to you and me, it's all over now. Really, thank you. Gluo turned his head to look at the branches that wrapped around Sukinghan, hesitated for a moment, and picked Mu Yingluo up from the ground. Her last wish was that Gluo would bury her on the windy hill in the north. This should be the location she had reserved before her death. The one buried there must be her. As for the person who buried her, Mu Yingluo hoped it would be Sukinghan, but she originally thought of Tang Zujian. But now, the only person she asked for help was Gluo. Everyone is dead. Chapter 448 Tomb. After the war, the land seemed to be filled with the smell of gunpowder. Gluo half crouched on the hillside and dug a 7 or 8 meter deep pit with his palms, and then stepped into Mu Yingluo's body. In a peaceful era, the death of a person is like a sudden car accident, which is not only eye-catching, but also very sad. But in chaos and disaster, death is just a trivial matter that does not need to be worried about. Someone dug a grave and buried the dead, which is already a good ending. In Mu Yingluo's last lesson before her death, Gluo saw the disgust and despair of this world in her eyes. She lived too tired and too hard, and she was not even willing to stay for even a moment longer. Gluo, is this enough? Crossing Yan walked behind Gluo without knowing when. She watched Gluo slowly flatten the soil and bury the girl in the deep pit, without any expression on her face. This is enough. Gluo actually didn't know what Mu Yingluo had experienced, or how many unbearable pasts she had, that made her die so calmly. In the end, Mu Yingluo just asked Gluo to bury her as soon as possible, so that others would feel disgusted if they looked at her body for one more time. Mu Yingluo wants to be buried here, and she wants to stay here quietly without anyone disturbing her. Gluo buried the pit roughly, then walked a little further, and found a big stone. He pulled hard with both arms, and lifted the half-ton boulder directly. Such a big tombstone, it would be great if she could be satisfied. Gluo pressed the half-ton boulder into the pit, then raised his finger, filled the source power in his fingertips, and wrote Mu Yingluo's name and information on the boulder. This is probably the heaviest tombstone in the world. After Gluo wrote the words, he began to continue filling the soil, and buried the whole boulder in the ground. Gluo, what happened to Sukinghan? Crossing Yan stood beside Gluo, watching him bury Mu Yingluo, and then use the gravity power to compact the land around the tomb, and sprinkled more floating soil on it. I don't know what happened, I just know it was caused by a seed. Gluo's attitude towards Crossing Yan at this time seemed a little cold, but Gluo's face was indifferent. No one knew what he was thinking. A seed, interesting. Crossing Yan seemed to feel the alienation in Gluo's words, and she lost her usual smile, but she didn't seem to have any intention of reviewing. Crossing Yan, Sukinghan died before, and the original power of the desolate god in her body has been absorbed by you. Gluo had already disguised Mu Yingluo's grave at this time, and it was impossible to see that someone was buried here. Gluo bowed solemnly, as a thank you for everything she had done. What do you mean I absorbed it? It was Heaven's Blade killing that absorbed it. I'm just the spirit of killing, and the enhancement I can get is limited. Crossing Yan seemed to be afraid that Gluo had some resentment in his heart, and there was a hint of distance in her words. But Crossing Yan didn't expect that at this time. Gluo suddenly turned around, staring at her with cold eyes, motionless. Zingayan, since Sukinghan has become the first apostle of the god of desolation, the world eater, Tikatera, then she must die. There is no doubt about it. As for why she was controlled by the power of the god of desolation, and why she was as dull as a puppet, with almost no fighting consciousness, I don't want to pursue it. After all, it's a matter of time. But, you have told me before, that Su Qinghan is dead, and the original power of the god of desolation has been completely absorbed by you, which means that Su Qinghan is no longer the first apostle. Is there a problem with what I said? Gluo's voice was slow and heavy, and there was no sign of anger on his face, but Su Qinghan could feel that, if she didn't give Gluo a satisfactory answer now, then he would rather fight to the death with her. Heaven's blade killing, Gluo always has general power. He is the owner of the Sky Gun and her contractor. If he really doesn't care about the cost, and bleeds into a river, she can't stop it. No problem, that's exactly what happened. Crossing Yan nodded solemnly. Her answer made Gluo's momentum relax. He looked up and down at Crossing Yan again, then turned and walked down the mountain. Crossing Yan, this is the first time and the last time. The reason why I will risk my life to protect this world is not because this world is so good, but because this world has people I want to protect. Gluo's indifferent voice drifted in the wind. Crossing Yan walked behind him, listening to the warning in Gluo's words, and said nothing. She seemed to have messed up the matter of Su Qinghan. Obviously, the trust between the two had just been established, but at too hasty means, too eager thoughts, and too ugly eating appearance eventually touched Gluo's bottom line. Crossing Yan certainly didn't think she was wrong. She also paid a huge price to kill Su Qinghan. After the whole battle, Gluo was sore, but her soul power was consumed a lot, and the stored source power was almost exhausted. She killed Su Qinghan not for revenge, or for personal feelings, but she had to die. She is protecting this world, and everything she says, is to fight against the god of desolation above the zenith, the world eater Takatera. Gluo naturally understood the motives of Crossing Yan's actions, so he did not turn against her directly, but to be frank, the trust between the two has disappeared. Trust is something that is both fragile and solid. It is an emotion, but it is not just an emotion. Reason, sensibility, and intellect will all affect this thing. Mutual trust is difficult to form, and when it is formed, one party must take the initiative to extend a hand of kindness, bear certain consequences and possibilities, and be prepared to be hurt. And now, Crossing Yan's plan, which she thought did not contain personal emotions, hurt Gluo because she had no personal feelings. Of course, Gluo would not think that Crossing Yan was a bad person in turn, but it is certain that he must no longer trust her. Because trust is such a fragile thing. It can accommodate selfishness and calculations, but it cannot tolerate betrayal and concealment. And now, Crossing Yan's concealment of Gluo completely destroyed the trust that Gluo had actively built up. After all, Su Qinghan was the most important person to Gluo. Gluo watched her die with his own eyes, and killed her with his own hands. This kind of impact and reality made Gluo even unable to accept it for a while. Chapter 449 Waiting. But it is precisely because Gluo could not simply accept it, that he would think and recall carefully after the past, looking for any abnormal clues. Thus, he confirmed that Crossing Yan was the guide and pusher behind everything. However, now everything is meaningless. When Gluo walked down the hillside and stepped on the ground that was flattened by gravity again, he could already feel the throbbing vitality underground. It is hard to imagine what kind of plant can spread its roots to a range of thousands of meters in such a short time. As for how deep it goes down, Gluo estimates that it will never be less than 100 meters. The nutrients in the soil are sucked happily by the seeds of life. Plants usually convert energy through photosynthesis, but under this frosty moonlight, the plant group wrapped around Su Qinghan has a diameter of nearly 10 meters. Boom, boom, boom. In a trance, Gluo can even hear the thunderous sound of his heartbeat. The roots buried underground are still spreading, and the unimaginable huge vitality is constantly being gathered and aggregated. This scene is really magical. Crossing Yan stood in front of the huge rhizome sphere, and was very curious about Su Qinghan's current state. In Crossing Yan's opinion, Su Qinghan was doomed to die. In order to kill her, the god of desolation directly treated his first apostle as a consumable, or a grenade with the fuse pulled out. Anyway, Su Qinghan who had already consumed too much source power, was able to be so powerful later because of the drained vitality, not to mention that her body was pierced through the heart by Heaven's blade killing. She was completely dead and could not die anymore. In terms of the soul, in order to strip the source power of the god of desolation, she directly cut off half of Sukinghan's soul. Without this half, let alone a human, even a star spirit like Gluo, the sun of the world, would be finished. Therefore, Crossing Yan was very curious about what form Sukinghan would be resurrected in. Maybe, the same result as Gluo? Reconstruct a new self, smooth out the wounds on the body, and then recast the damaged soul. The previous memories are directly turned into bricks and tiles, and what is gone is gone. Your world also has an incredible genius. Crossing Yan has a good eye, and naturally can see that this 6th gold level seed of life has been transformed. It was specially constructed into a complex and wonderful ritual. The rich seed tide source power is overflowing from the roots of the plant. The water attributed source power is the best moisturizer for plants, and can be said to be an indispensable part of the entire ceremony. In order to construct this ceremony, Tang Zujian caused at least thousands of people to die. Gluo actually wanted to touch these branches with strong vitality, but considering his own specialness, Gluo still did not reach out his hand. Mu Yingluo told me that I was the one who caused Li Xiaoan's illness. Later, the pain that Sukinghan and the others endured was also caused by me. Now that it has come to this, I cannot avoid my responsibility. Is this probably the margin of a strong man? After all, the Gluo 10 years ago, as long as there was enough time, was almost omnipotent on this planet. Crossing Yan actually wanted to ease the relationship with Gluo, but she saw that Gluo refused her, and she had no choice but to find a way to talk to him. Geniuses like Tang Zujian will be stained with cause and effect and blood in order to resurrect a person and make preparations and research for several years. But if it was you 10 years ago, you probably only need to snap your fingers and everything will be over. Unfortunately, that person is not me. Gluo now doesn't know why, but when he hears the information of his past self, he can no longer be shaken. The past is finally over, and the gone will never come back. Gluo can already face the figure behind time calmly without worrying about it. After all, in that dream, what he saw was a little boy who was a little lonely, a little rebellious, and a little arrogant. He had a power close to a miracle, but he actually went to use a magnifying glass to look at ants. It is conceivable how bored he was. The child's recklessness was punished after all, but he was kind to Gluo now. That day, he knew that he needed power, so he gave him the power of Ares, without hesitation. That is, eternal life. By the way, Xingyan, what happened to the other half of you? Gluo and Xingyan were waiting for the changes in the seed of life. There was nothing to talk about, so they found a suitable topic. You said before that the evil half of you that was sealed in the suburbs of Changlin City was about to come out. It's not coming out immediately, but it must have woken up. Xingyan finally stopped dwelling on the past. She seemed to have put down her previous burden and let go of her hatred. 10 years ago, you tore my soul in half with your own hands. The good side was sealed in your sea of consciousness, and the evil side was sealed in the earth veins. The strangest thing is that you had the ability to destroy my body back then, but you didn't. Instead, you sealed it off with a spiritual object called the White Tree. Some time ago, I felt the throbbing of the other half of myself. That feeling should be that my evil half has regained its body. It only needs a period of adaptation to break the seal easily. Crossing Yan finally stopped hiding it from Gluo and told him about the bad situation. Gluo frowned and felt a little strange. Why, 10 years ago, I clearly relied on the power of the self-destructing Skyblade Zuanian sword to defeat Crossing Yan at that time. Why didn't he kill her and completely destroy Crossing Yan? What does it mean? Is he trying to raise a goo? The good side of Crossing Yan was sealed in a fragment of the heavenly blade Zuanian sword and thrown into the depths of his consciousness. The evil side of Crossing Yan was thrown into the suburbs and sealed with a large formation. Jiang and Yu, a 6th golden level warrior, watched closely. The most puzzling thing is that the enemy's body was not crushed to ashes, but just sealed up, and the White Tree was used to isolate the breath. What is this for? Leaving the disaster to the future? Crossing Yan back then was the one that Gluo risked his life to get rid of. Now there is no equal opponent. If Crossing Yan's evil soul has a body, can Changlin City still exist? Gluo, I just burst out with all my strength. Because of the resonance of the soul, my other half must have felt it. It will definitely speed up the adaptation process and will soon break the seal and come out. By then, Crossing Yan didn't say it too thoroughly, but Gluo could imagine with his eyes closed how cruel the villain who was locked up in the small dark room for 10 years would be when he came out. Chapter 450 Newborn. One thing after another, there is no peace of mind. Gluo now feels really exhausted physically and mentally. He awakened his original talent 10 years ago and survived for 10 years, living a relatively peaceful life. But 10 years later, as soon as he emerged, the whole world was full of malice. There was no peaceful day at all, which made people irritated. This world is approaching the end of the world. How can we live in peace? Crossing Yan was also in a low mood at this time. She sighed and seemed to want to say something to Gluo, but the change on the side interrupted her words. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of a chick breaking the eggshell suddenly sounded beside them. Gluo and Crossing Yan turned their eyes and found that the plant group wrapped around Sukinghun was now withering little by little. It was like the passing of the spring when branches and buds sprouted, the disappearance of the lush summer, the slow departure of the fruitful autumn, and the bone-chilling winter approaching step by step. The 4 seasons of the plant seemed to be extremely fast at this moment. The vines that sprouted a few hours ago and then had dense roots and stems began to slowly wither at this time. The stems and vines seemed to have been drained of vitality. The emerald green color quickly faded and turned into a withered yellow color without moisture. It even made people feel that it would burn into a large ball with just a little flame. But fortunately, no one set the fire now, so this process, although slow, was carried out very peacefully. The whole plant was withering. Gluo, do you think it has been completed, or not enough energy? Crossing Yan was also a little curious about the scenery in front of her, but she had already made a small guess about the hidden story. Normally, if the vitality was really enough, then this plant should be more lush. Now this kind of decaying scene is obviously drained of vitality to supply the life nurtured in it. Let it be. Gluo thought that the whole process of resurrection would last for a few days or months, but who knew that after only a few hours, the seed of life went straight to the last step. I believe that any evolver can clearly feel the majestic natural energy. This level of energy flow will completely block any prying eyes. As time passed, the speed of the vines withering not only did not slow down, but became faster and faster. The vine sphere with a diameter of about 10 meters completely dried up into a ball in almost 10 minutes. Then, the aqua blue source power rushed up to the sky, almost with an absolute crushing force, tearing the dry vines into pieces, revealing the life wrapped in the center. This is. Crossing Yan has seen a lot, but at this time, the scene she saw still made her heart sway. In the sea tide source power that gathered into water, a girl who looked like 12 or 13 years old was sleeping peacefully. She slept very peacefully, and the expression on her face was pure that could only be seen in babies, as if she had never been polluted by any turbidity in the world. On the back of the girl's left hand, the olive-shaped gem named Spring Poem was shining with aqua blue light. On the back of her right hand, the ice blue gemstone named Winter Poem was also clearly visible, but the color was dim. Sukinghun. Gluo looked at the girl who looked about 12 or 13 years old in front of him, and his thoughts were confused for a while, and he didn't know what to think at all. Obviously, Sukinghun was really resurrected, but as Mu Yingluo said, Sukinghun was not really resurrected, but reborn. This process was like using the body of the former Sukinghun as raw material to reshape a baby, and then accelerate her growth. At the same time, Sukinghun's incomplete soul was used as raw material to construct a young soul, put it in the new body, and grow with it. However, the vitality of the seed of life obviously had a huge gap, which interrupted Sukinghun's accelerated growth process, and showed the current posture. Enough. This is enough. Gluo couldn't help but smile. He raised his hand to cover his eyes, and tears kept falling. He was not sad. He was really happy. It didn't matter whether Sukinghan could remember him or not, as long as she was alive. That was enough. That's good. Crossing Yan smiled and nodded, feeling a little happy and shocked. At most, it would take only 10 years for the source power of this world to recover, but in such a short time, the humans in this world came up with this method. A person who had been defined as dead in both soul and body was pulled back by a miracle. GLUO, go, hug your lover. Crossing Yan's tone was a bit bad at this time, but GLUO didn't care at all. He seemed to be afraid that everything in front of him was fake. He hesitated for a long time before finally taking a step. The source power of the sea tide condensed into liquid, like a curtain, surrounded the newly born Sukinghan. GLUO stepped closer, and the water curtain seemed to sense its master, and respectfully made way for GLUO to walk into the water curtain. At this time, the naked girl was sleeping peacefully. GLUO took off his coat and carefully covered her. Then, GLUO tentatively picked up the newborn girl, and the surrounding liquid source power, without the slightest bit of rebellion, seemed to have been waiting for GLUO's arrival. A huge amount of source power surrounded GLUO's body. Then, the gem named Spring Poem slowly faded away, and the curtain-like water source power began to be absorbed by the gem, and disappeared into the air. Half a minute later, the extraordinary scene just now seemed to have never happened, without leaving any trace. Only GLUO was left standing in the middle of a pile of dry plants, holding a young girl in his arms. Sukinghan, it's great to see you again. GLUO held the sleeping girl, as if he was holding a treasure. He carefully moved his shoulders, to make the girl sleep more comfortably. GLUO, everything is over here, we should rush to Changlin City. Crossing Yan's words were a bit inappropriate, but GLUO stared at the newborn Sukinghan, and nodded without hesitation. Xingyan's evil half is sealed in the suburbs of Changlin City. If we are not prepared, a disaster will happen, and the whole city will be gone. Xingyan, when will Sukinghan wake up? I don't know, maybe tomorrow, maybe a year. Her body and soul are both newborn, and have not yet been well reconciled. She is dreaming, a long dream. Xingyan wanted to build a good relationship with GLUO at this time, so her words mostly sounded comforting. When she wakes up from her dream, the real Sukinghan will come back. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.